All right, so what's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. It is about 8:09 p.m. where I'm at right now. The date is July 6th, 2024, and we are on our second book in our book to react series. Slowly breaking this book down is The Turk, a White Man, written by Murat Ergin, I believe published in 2018. And you can pick this book up on Amazon for the humble price of only $30, paperback, $151 in the hardcover. And yeah, so far this book has been very fascinating, a bit challenging. It's a much harder book than the first book we read, Cyber Racism, written by Jesse Daniels. But we're going to continue our studies in these subjects because we want to understand white supremacy. We want to understand the world, and books are our portals to higher levels of knowledge. So anybody that likes to learn, anybody that wants to be engaged in intelligent conversation, come on in this live stream, jump in the chats, jump in the comments. I will try to read every comment in the live stream as it's happening. I will be answering all questions. I will be giving commentary on this book because this is a reaction to the text, studying it in depth. So Ozzy says, yeah, this book is very dense. Sorry if I'm beating y'all over the head with this book. We're only on chapter 4 in this 286-page book, but we're halfway there. And I'm going to try to finish up this book possibly over the weekend, if not mid next week, and then we're going to jump into another book. But if you have any book suggestions, please let us know. All right, please send it our way. But anyway, I'm going to be saying this. Let's go recap what we learned in this book. So the first introduction of this book is the author talking about his motivations for writing it. Basically, he was a young Turkish man living in America and studying sociology and teaching sociology at universities, and he wanted to better understand this topic of race in the context of Turkey, or modern Turkey, post Republican Revolution or Republican Reform. In the first chapter of the book, he covered all of the detractors who would ever give an argument as to why this book should not have been written, and he debunked out our present and talk about our possible futures. And in the third chapter, which was the longest chapter, about 50 pages, he was talking about the intellectuals who were talking about the creation of the modern Turk. And basically, to sum it up, to make it shorter, there were a bunch of white guys who went to Turkey, and basically they started writing about the racial history of the Turks, that the Turks were actually inheritors of the white race, or they were a part of the building of Western civilization because of the Turks' history, and so forth. It goes a bit deeper. I'm just giving brief cursory overviews for what we've studied so far in this book. But today we're jumping into chapter 4, Race in Early Republican Turkey. And let's go. Racial vocabularies. In a report outlining national archaeological activities in 1938, Afet Inan, a prominent female scholar of the period, as well as one of Ataturk's adopted daughters, burst into a passionate tirade. The Turkish race is white and bracephalic. The owners of our homeland today are the children of the oldest makers of culture and share the same racial characteristics. Based on the testimony of cultural remains, the cradle of this race is in Central Asia. The civilized parts of the world are the areas in which Turkish culture, spread with the torch of culture. The Near East and the Mediterranean served as the center of this civilization. Europe and the ancient American culture, as it passed through the Pacific, received their power and inspiration from the same source. Very interesting. So for people who don't know who Ataturk is, for anybody who's new, but everybody who's been listening should know, Ataturk is basically like the George Washington type figure who founded the modern Republic of Turkey in the early 20th century. Ataturk never had any children of his own, similar to George Washington, and his adopted daughter was heavy into race science. I believe she went to Switzerland just to study race science and to try to continue to perpetuate this idea that Turks are white. Right? Continuing here. How did racial imagery become such an essential part of Turkish identity in this period? What purpose did this outlandish emphasis on Turks' civilizing mission serve? And how were the perceptions of the West, both hated as a source of injustices for conspiring against the Turks, as well as admired for its accomplishments, at the center of these concerns? This chapter discusses the ways in which race and modernization have been intertwined in early Republican Turkey, 1923 to 1950. Building on the previous chapters, chapters that examine the ingress of racial vocabularies into the Ottoman's imperial constellation of modernization. I will now focus on post-imperial Republican period. At this significant historical juncture, race became firmly embedded in the modernizing elite's self-conceptions and began to be disseminated through scholarship, education, and popular publications. As we will see in Chapter 6, in the following decades, racial vocabularies penetrated hierarchies that began to classify individuals in terms of both cultural and physical capital. Therefore, this chapter starts with an account of cultural boundaries as they were established through a particular orientation toward modernity. The following two sections tell the story of the two-pronged but complementary attempts to invent a racialized Turkish identity, a historically oriented project to discover Turkish roots in a timeless past, and a future-oriented project of protecting racial essences against threats of degeneration. Yes, finally. Finally, we are now going to talk about the Turks creating themselves as white or buying into white racial superiority. Finally, by chapter 4, Jesus Christ. Well, I've said this before in the previous live streams about this book. The most frustrating thing about this piece is I feel like the audience for this book is not written for people who already understand white supremacy, already understand the creation of whiteness. It's like he's writing for Turkish intellectuals who already don't even understand these concepts. So he has to try to make it palatable for them and also try to dress it up with, $5 words, if you get what I'm saying. So Ozzy says, all of this race stuff comes from the West, shaking my head. Absolutely, Ozzy. Absolutely. The creation of race was a part of European colonial expansion across the globe, and other groups of people bought into it, except Black Americans. Black Americans are the only group of people who have consistently fought against white supremacy and the ideas that white is right and white makes better. But other groups of people, when they were conquered or nearly conquered, like the Turks, what do? Hey, we're white too. Hey, how can we get some of this whiteness? Hey, you got any cake soap? Hey, you got any bleaching cream? That's what other groups of people do. I'm going to keep it a buck. And Ozzy, I don't know where you're from, but I'm going to keep it absolutely real. Now, other groups of people should be waking up, and we are seeing an awakening in the diaspora of Black people across the world and other non-white peoples, right, to fight against white supremacy and how wicked and evil these ideas are. But unfortunately, at the beginning of the 20th century, people were thinking, well, the white man conquered us, so they must be stronger. Well, the white man conquered us, so he must be smarter. The white man conquered us, so he must be better. And unfortunately, that's what the Turks bought into. Continuing here. So, although the extant literature on Turkish history predominantly treats this particular period as one of nation building, the vibrant and sometimes outlandish intellectual trends of the period were informed by racial discourses intended to address the conundrums produced by westernization. In a process steered by the modernizing elites, Turkish identity was molded in terms that included immutable definitions of belonging. The terrain, littered with racial vocabularies, was neither a temporary detour nor a wrong turn. The racial formation of Turkish identity had both persistent and formative aspects. It was persistent because racial conceptions were carried over from Ottoman modernity, as we have seen in previous chapters, and remain part of Turkish identity in the contemporary period, as we will see later. It was formative because the significance of whiteness in the search for modernity turned race into an urgent issue. The consequence was not only a large body of scholarship spread by means of textbooks and other channels of popular dissemination, but also included instances of discrimination against ethnic and religious minorities. Although the application of racial thinking at the level of policy formation did not include practices as extreme as forced sterilization, race was a significant part of the puzzle in the formation of Turkish identity and its encounters with Western modernity. The linkages between race, nationalism, and modernity render the racial conceptions embedded in Turkishness complex and multifaceted. There is a temptation to simply push aside the outlandish stories of the Turkish transformation as narrated by the Republican elite. But these stories, the Republican conversion narrative, as I call it, created the dominant truth of the period. This narrative identified the markers that separated past from present and recounted a story of sudden transformation from the fragmented identity of the Ottomans into a coherent collective identity centered on Turkishness. This coherence, however, called for an ideology of classification, the Republican taxonomic ideology, which demarcated the boundaries between the Turkish and the non-Turkish, as well as between the modern and the traditional. racialized Turkish identity emerged in conjunction with this conversion narrative, with the discourse of classification, and with the disturbing ghosts of the past. So basically, he's referring back to, an earlier chapter we read, I believe it was chapter 2, talking about how the Republicans, basically the people who got rid of the Ottoman Empire after the Ottomans lost World War I, right? They created this narrative that the Ottoman Empire was on its last legs. It was falling apart. It had fallen into degeneracy. And the Republican reform was this new, sort of revolution that would bring enlightenment to the Turks, right? But in the creation of this sort of new enlightenment, right, they also had to create ideas of what is Turkishness? What will this nation state be based on? Will it be a linguistic, multiracial, multi-ethnic, nation, like how the Ottomans sort of created or forced upon other people? Will it be based on Islamism? Will it be based on Turkish identity? And that was the wrestling part that they had to do. But also at the same time, while they were still confused about how to center the nation, they were being influenced by Western powers, who were bringing in their culture, their technological advancements, and their civilization into Turkey, right? And they associated that sort of modernity with whiteness. And so as the Republicans sort of coalesced around the idea of Turkish nationalism and leaving the other two to fall by the wayside, they ended up coming up, with all sorts of schemes and creations to say, we are now white people. We deserve Western civilization, and we are also a part of Western civilization because we are white as well. That's what he is trying to get at here. Continuing here. Mermaids, fish, humans, the taxonomic discourse. Classification systems tend to separate the world into either binaries, either, for example, men and women, black and white, or trinaries, lower, middle, and upper class, low, average, and high IQ. Further, in both the social sciences and people's everyday experiences, one pole of these binaries or trinaries tends to attract more attention: women, black, low, and high income, IQ, whatever. Whereas the other poles, men, white, average income IQ, right, are taken for granted and thus remain concealed. This section deals with Turkish modernity and the trinary system of classification it created. Throughout the late Ottoman and Republican periods, modern, or the middle category, was shrouded in a definitional haze, with its counterparts of traditional, representing insufficient modernization, and ultramodern, representing excessive modernization, were prodded, regulated, and excluded from cultural spaces seen as belonging to the modern. Top-down reforms by the secular and Western educated elite intended to shield the modern from the attacks of its definitional antitheses. Although Turkey itself was never formally colonized, its rocky relationship with modernity calls for post-colonial analogies. The attempt to establish a system of cultural classification was primarily a response to the problematic of moving into the modern while still maintaining a traditional essence, a paradox experienced by many late modernizing post-colonial nationalisms. The question of how to modernize while at the same time retaining and developing a non-Western identity offered a multitude of challenges. The inevitable problem was to draw a boundary between the East and the West, designate a position for Turks in this classification, and finally assign relevant cultural, linguistic, and racial categories along the boundary. The task faced by the early Republican leaders was threefold: to determine desirable parts of Western culture fit for adoption, to identify and keep various parts of Turkish culture that were open to Western progress, and to weed out those aspects considered backwards and non-reformable. The following passage from Ziya Golkap's The Principles of Turkism, a book that was published in 1923 and had an enormous influence on Republicans, illustrates the threefold taxonomic task of adoption, reformation, and exclusion in the cultural field. Golkap, a Kurd born in Diyarbakir in southeastern Turkey, was one of the earliest ideologues of Turkish nationalism. Now, for anybody who doesn't know, the Kurdish people, by and large, are the oppressed minority of Turkey, right? If there could be any analogy, Kurds are to Turkey what Black Americans are to America, right? Like they are, considered the underclass. So I find it very fascinating that this Kurdish man was the proponent of this sort of unifying Turkish nationalism. I believe Zia Kolkap had the quote where he tried to unify the three disparate parts. He said, I'm a descendant of the Ottomans, a member of the Muslim Ummah, and a Turkish man at heart, something like that. Like he tried to unify the disparate, identities that Turks had at the time. So very interesting that he would be the one to be a proponent of this sort of nationalism. Continuing here. Today we face three types of music: Eastern music, Western Western music and folk music. Which one among them is national for us? We see Eastern music as both sick and non national, since folk music is the music of our culture and Western music is the music of our new civilization. Neither should be foreign to us. In this case, our national music is to be born out of a synthesis of folk music and Western music. Very interesting. See, I always find it interesting when that we can when he's referring to the East. I think he's referring to the East as the Muslim world, right? And this is the thing, if you go to Turkey or talk to Turkish people, from my experience, from my understanding, Turkish people still have this sort of weird battle in their souls for their nation, where they say, listen, we want to hold on to our Turkish roots and culture, but at the same time we want to incorporate all the modernity and all the benefits of being a part of the modern Western developed world, right? And it seems to be this push and pull, tug of war in their minds that somehow also causes a bit of an inferiority complex, because they can never be as good or as close to modernity as the Westerners, as the whites, and I'm talking about in the modern era. And so then that then leads them to have some sort of superiority complex over their people, over the people in Turkey who still cling to the folk traditions and the culture of the past, and also the Arabs around them as well. All right. So Ata Yuche says, no, we're certainly not white or black. We're a little gray. So marhaba to Ata. But what we are talking about here is the creation of whiteness in modern Turkey, and how the framers of your country ended up positioning the idea that Turks are white, because whiteness was affiliated with modernity. So that's the reason I'm saying that, Atayuche. I hope you are coming in to learn and actually understand what whiteness is, what white supremacy is, and how race is a social construct that was created by the Europeans to divide people and also create some sort of buffer between different groups of people for the advancement of all. Continuing here, early Republican Turkey witnessed a large scale intellectual mobilization whose fruits were spread by means ranging from scholarly publications and conferences to articles in newspapers and magazines and public speeches. The Republican conversion narrative presented this emerging body of knowledge as a sign of both Turkey's modernization and its Turkification. Indeed, modernity and the challenges it brought had much to do with the military and civilian bureaucrats' urgent attention to identity issues. The implicit mission of this body of knowledge, of which racial images and understandings were an integral part, was to classify objects, practices, and identities. In other words, a crucial aspect of the taxonomic discourses in Republican intellectual currents was to define Turkish cultural identity with the help of race science. In this section, we will see that racial and cultural classification pursued parallel logics, with race frequently transgressing the boundaries of biological difference to overflow into culture. All right, Ata Yuche says, we are not white nor black, we're little gray. Wolfmen cause we're Turkmen, we're wolfmen. So Ata Yuche is possibly a person who is not intelligent. But I'll ask Ata Yuche this question: what is whiteness? What is whiteness and what is white supremacy, Atayuche? If you answer that question, we can continue this conversation. Until you answer that question, what is whiteness, who are white, and what is white supremacy? Those three questions, Atayuche, I will not be replying to any more of your comments, because you are not a person who actually came to learn. You're a very, very stupid person. Continuing here, the Republican cultural classifications actively delineated strict boundaries between modern and traditional, Turkish and not Turkish, and high and low taste, among other dichotomies, and defended these boundaries against the attacks of alternative discourses. The resulting taxonomies formed a vast body of signs, symbols, and representations, a body that helped maintain a dominant way of thinking and offered solutions to the real and imagined challenges from the outside. For example, Western modernity as well as the inside. For example, the discontent of the governed. The discursive formation that emerged from the Republican cultural mobilization was simultaneously enabling and limiting, delineating, for example, not only incorrect forms of art, but also the correct way of appreciating approved of art. It facilitated the creation of historically specific fields of meaning and drew the boundaries of acceptability around those fields by broadly demarcating approved from unapproved linguistic and practical conventions. It would not be an overstatement to say that the framework of compartmentalizing, ordering, and ranking cultural objects and practices established during the early Republican era still occupies a relevant place within cultural debates in contemporary Turkey. So basically, what he's talking about here is that the Republicans at the time started to, like, segment the different aspects of Turkish culture. They said this is low culture, the stuff that we used to do in the Ottoman period. This is now middle culture, and now we have high culture. That's how I'm reacting to what he has written there. Right, that's what the early Republicans of Turkey decided to do. So the debates around what is Western, universal, and hence should be Turkish, what is Turkish and hence should be Western, universal, and what is neither Turkish nor Western and hence should be rejected, was not limited to music. The efforts to develop an overarching scheme of compartmentalization for every aspect of life became central to early Republican politics. The final judgment on the nature, quality, and value of a broad range of societal and individual practices revolved around a seemingly straightforward question, explicitly or implicitly, of whether they were Eastern to be rejected, folk to be reformed, or Western to be adopted. Frameworks of classification varied in different cases. Racial concerns with modernity, for example, brought whiteness and Europeanness into the picture. Nevertheless, the main concern in these efforts remained distinguishing East from West, traditional from modern, and implanting local identities into the mix. The immense mobilization to modernize that began in the late 1920s attacked and excluded its alternatives, which were constructed as backward, Eastern, tasteless, or non-national. In terms of introducing new elements into Turkish society, the Republican regime performed rather rapid acts of social transformation, and especially in urban centers where governmental control was more complete. The speed and success of reforms were impressive. The script changed from Ottoman, a combination of Arabic and Persian elements, to Latin in the span of a few years. A new legal system, a new secular culture, and a new understanding of Turkishness were all imposed with lasting effects. Although Islamic and Kurdish resistance to reforms in that period should not be underestimated. Each reform was intended to push out what previously existed in an already occupied social space. The hat reform, for example, targeted the Ottoman fez. The new script declared the Ottoman script as the enemy. The new idea of a single Turkish identity challenged the centuries-old Ottoman millet system. Given its fascination with boundaries and categories, the taxonomic discourses of the Republican elite did not welcome hybridity. So this is like extremely radical. Like, think about this. Like, imagine, there's a revolution in America, and then over the span of the next few years, all Americans switch from writing in the Latin script to writing in Cyrillic, right? The government in certain cities says we're going to tear down all these Protestant churches and build Eastern Orthodox cathedrals, right? And we're going to get rid of baseball caps, and everybody's got to now wear, I don't know, big Russian, furry hats, like how they wear in winter in Moscow or something like that. Like, think about how radical that was. Like, from the Western perspective, right? Like, if you grew up in a Western country, we didn't have those sorts of radical changes to adjust ourselves to another culture. But think about the Turkish perspective, like the Turkish people at that time. If you were like 30 years old and you died when you were 60, right? And you were 30 at the time the revolution happened. Half of your life was spent living under the Ottoman system. You remember a caliph. You remember, there being masjids everywhere, and there are still masjids all over Turkey, but the Islamic culture having way more influence. And then in the next half of your life, when you die at 60, you're seeing women walk around without hijabs. You're seeing people writing in a script that you can't understand. And you're hearing the top intellectuals of the country say, we are now moving in the direction of modernity. Oh yeah, by the way, all of y'all are white too. Like, think about how radical that is. Like, how much that could affect the minds of people, right? And how that can create this sort of like confusion, alienation, and also, I would say, inferiority in people, to see that their culture had to radically change to adjust to a new world that was not of their own creation, right? So Ozzy says, damn, they wasted no time. The inferiority complex is glaring. Absolutely. Absolutely. So this aversion to hybridity had its roots in Ottoman modernity. During the mid 19th century, reforms that centralized the empire and created an elite group of military and civilian bureaucrats, conceptions of the West played a central role in modernization. However, the modernizers faced a paradox, the same one that, as noted above, also faced post colonial nation builders: how to incorporate Western modernity into local life worlds when they were when the very notion of modernity was packaged as the negation of the existing, supposedly unchanging and passive Eastern identity. What would happen when the passive East actively mobilized to import a modernity that equated the non Western with an innate inability to modernize? This paradox rendered modernity both desirable and unattainable, and led to a 2 century long endeavor that, in a dizzying array of debates, pondered, prodded, and attempted to classify all aspects of culture. Two projects were central. The first was to define, and in the process, invent authentic local identities to be protected from the assault of excessive modernization. There were unending debates about the proper role of race, religion, ethnicity, and gender in defining these authentic identities. The second project had to do with establishing the proper level of modernity. Implicit in this was the assumption that one could have too little as well as too much modernity. And so a spectrum was established between two ideal typical extremes, traditional and ultra modern. The invention of boundaries between different degrees of modernization would have crucial implications for the formation of Turkish identity and the cultural debates around it. It is necessary to first explore the birth of tradition, quote unquote, for it was created out of nothing. In the 19th century, a group of reformers, the Young Ottomans, began to complain about polygyny, adolescent marriages, and extended families in Ottoman Istanbul in their efforts to import modern bourgeoisie domesticity. While opposing these customs may seem a natural reaction for those in search of modernity, research shows us that these social problems did not, in fact, exist. In other words, tradition as a category of classification was created to establish modernity as its contrast. Mm. Interesting. Interesting. So instead of there being a natural, this is very deep and philosophical, but does tradition actually exist, or do anything, or is anything that we think of as tradition just a creation to negate against modernity? That's very deep to think about it. Like when we think about, American culture, right? When we think about our traditions, bursting, flags. No, not bursting flags, though we do want to burst flags. Bursting bursting firecrackers, bursting fireworks, eating hot dogs and stuff like that. Do those traditions naturally exist, or do we say those traditions, those are our traditions, as opposed to what people are doing now, which is, I don't know, playing Xbox or playing PlayStation 5 all day on 4th of July, or being on a live stream on 4th of July and stuff like that. Like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just very interesting right here. That's a deep topic for me. Continuing here. In other words, tradition as a category of classification was created to establish modernity as its contrast. Ottoman modernizers invented a prior state of existence in which family relations were flawed in order to promote modernity as the necessary corrective. The ultramodern then originated as a response from the Ottomans' anxiety concerning the dangers of over modernization. For example, as in the 19th century literary tradition that depicted ultra-modernity in the form of Ottoman snobs who were indignant about local customs. Women, however, were generally expected to avoid the duality by falling neither into the category of tradition, backward peasant woman, nor ultra-modernity, loose, promiscuous women. The Republican taxonomic discourse therefore maintained the boundaries between modernity and its counterparts by rejecting not only the Ottoman past, which was associated with tradition, but also that which was perceived as a rootless modernity. Racial theories served an important purpose in this sense because they established both the innate propensity of Turks to modernize, hence fending off the damaging effect of tradition, and the essential Turkishness of Western modernity, hence eliminating the dangers of rootless modernity. Taxonomic exclusions of the tradition and the ultramodernity in the cultural domain, however, pose two serious problems. First, how to deal with the alternative discourses that needed to be excluded altogether. Second, how to deal with the individuals and collectives that schizophrenically hosted both desirable cultural practices to be adopted or reformed, and undesirable ones to be excluded. As an ideal typical model, taxonomic boundary drawing did not reflect the complex realities of hybridity in the social life of individuals and collectivities. Individuals often conform to the modern and traditional at the same time, and collective practices frequently contained both desirable and undesirable aspects. The schizophrenia of Turkish culture was not an easy pill to swallow. Any hybrid being, whether an individual or collective, was a potential threat to the strict threefold separation between the traditional, the properly modern, and the ultra modern. In its attempts to manage this challenge, this Republican modernizer had to oppose hybridity for its contradictory nature. The undesirable extremes were tolerable in their pure form, but when the taxonomic boundaries between them were permeated, the ensuing Frankenstein had to be destroyed. In the memoirs, Falil Rifki Ate, one of Ataturk's close friends and confidants, argues that the Republican reforms differed from late Ottoman reforms in their adamant and uncompromising nature, and illustrates this with a taxonomic metaphor. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk did not believe in the tales of mermaids. You can either be a fish or a human being. Turkish cultural modernization revolved around drawing boundaries between the fish and humans of modernization and then resolving the contradictions created by the mermaids, hybrid individuals and collectivities that violated the ideal typical purity of this cultural project. So Donnie Williams said, listening in, shout out to Donnie Williams right here. Listen, this is a fascinating concept. So basically, the Republican reformers, right, they're saying like, okay, there are grades of modernity. This is, by the way, it's all top down. So the intellectuals, the top brass who are running the new, Republican, Democratic Turkey after the end of the Ottomans, they're telling the people, listen, we're going to be white now and we're going to be modern, right? And we want y'all to start implementing these things, right? But at the same time, they have to try to maintain tradition as well, because things cannot be too radical and go too far to the extreme, right? So they're saying like, listen, the people are supposed to incorporate as much modernity as possible, but still, not be so far extreme in that way. And yet and still there were still traditions that people would hold on to. So they weren't try to meld them, syncretize them. They were saying, listen, this is the new way, only that way. And when these contradictions appeared, when people were trying to have their cake and eat it too, be traditional and modern at the same time, that could not exist, right? Like Ataturk said, right? You're either a fish or you're a human. There's no such thing as a mermaid. There's no such thing as half fish, half human people, right? Continuing here, a number of examples show that the leader of the Republican experienced the problem of modernity, hybridity personally. A number of examples show that the leader of the Republican experienced the problem of hybridity personally. The official discourse on Ataturk's artistic preferences presented him as the epitome of the modern individual, with high taste and broad knowledge. According to his servant's memoirs, however, a discrepancy existed between Ataturk's public image and his private pleasures. Although he favored Western music in public, he privately preferred traditional Turkish music. Ataturk's servant comments, Ataturk, who could never get rid of Alaturka, Turkish style mannerisms in his private life, had gone so far that, for a certain period, he had reserved the radio only for Alafranga, Western style music, and because of the complaints about this decision, he had reminded Alaturka lovers that generations that foment a revolution should cope with deprivations and sacrifices. Interesting. Unable to resolve the contradiction in this personal taste, unable to resolve the contradiction in his personal taste, Ataturk rigidly delineated the public and private spheres and concealed his private artistic pleasures for the sake of public pedagogy. Turkey's history is full of efforts to impose correct culture onto popular forms. What was at stake in the Republican taxonomy, however, was more than simply the distinction between high and low, or good and bad culture. The taxonomic ideology served as a primary tool of modernization. This modernization, in turn, was not only a way of westernizing Turkey, but of constructing a coherent Turkish identity free of contradictions and fragmentation. The elite presented the requirements for a coherent identity not only as a personal, but also as a collective problem, as a means to downplay the importance of personal pleasure. Serving the Republic, according to this view, necessitated sacrifice. In order to resolve the problem of hybridity and maintain the boundaries of the Republican cultural model intact, individuals needed to suppress the pleasure of rejected domains for the sake of a public truth, and followers were expected to change their lives and even their individual identities to match the Republican taxonomic model. Yet, as the case of Ataturk himself shows, the hybrid realities of personal lives often did not match the ideals of the Republican taxonomic project, and followers of Ataturk themselves had to deal with complexities that did not correspond to the clear boundaries suggested by the Republican taxonomy of taste. So basically, right, Very interesting. So the Republicans were telling people, you got to be modern in your culture. And I think looking back, us looking back on how Ataturk would act, we would say, my guy, why are you trying to be so whitewashed? Like Ataturk would, wear suits and waltz and listen to Western music and stuff like that. But secretly, he loved his own music and his own culture. But he thought being modern meant listening to, I don't know, whatever composer was popular in France at the time. And that's the thing. Like, we it's easy for us to look back at these people and say, man, these guys were coconuts, right? Like brown on the outside, white on the inside, right? And it's like they were trying so hard to be accepted for a group of people that would never accept them to some degree, right? Because during all this time that the Republicans are, trying to modernize and be more Western or more white, right? The whites at that time were still saying in their books, the terrible Turk. The Turk is unreasonable. He's a brute. He's a savage, and that sort of stuff. So it's very interesting that this sort of dichotomy is happening, right? It's sort of like, imagine like Candace Owens, she makes videos all day saying black people are ghetto, black people are ratchet, black people are violent, but then secretly behind closed doors, Candace Owens is listening to Young Jeezy playing with straps in the mirror, doing the finger guns and stuff like that. That would be hilarious. That's sort of like what Ataturk was doing. Like behind closed doors when nobody was looking, he started, you get what I'm saying? But then when the cameras came on, he started like waltzing and stuff. I don't know. Pretty funny to me. It's once again insane that people will do these sorts of extreme things to be a part of the dominant white society. Continuing here. Uh, so the taxonomies operating in cultural domains were related to racial taxonomies. The reasons for the opposition to Eastern music and its later incarnations, such as arabesque, a type of urban popular music, originated in part in the anti-Arab sentiments deeply embedded in Turkish nationalism. Arabesque's nominal links with Arabs, who served as one of the quintessential others in defining Turkishness during the early Republican era, was further complicated by its musical links with Ottoman Egypt. The official response to Egyptian music after it began to enter Turkey after 1930 was to ignore the centuries of cultural exchange between the two countries and to consider this music alien and unsuitable to the Turkish character. Thus, the rejection of Eastern music should be considered a part of the broader mobilization to establish the purity of Turkish history, language, and race, and to distinguish Turkishness from other non-Western identities. Anti-Arab sentiments, in particular, have supplied the terms for Westernization and become the engine of transformation in Turkey since the early Republican period. And cultural debates around issues ranging from the quality of radio broadcasting to the influence of Egyptian musical movies and arabesque to women's headscarves were all grounded in the early Republican rejection of Arabic influences and deployed a distinctly Orientalist vocabulary. Turkish identity was therefore formed not only positively in terms of claims of whiteness, but also negatively, questions of who we are when negotiated within the pool of possible answers to who we are not, and debates around tradition, modernity, and the ultramodern symbolized a battleground between a white, European, and modern Turkey and an Arab, Eastern, and backward Turkey. So just to clarify all that from my impression and my reaction to that text, the way white people, or at least the white supremacists, look at Turkey is how the Turks or Turk supremacists look at the Arabs, right? The whites say the Turks, they're Muslim. They don't even distinguish them. Like in the minds of like the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the Ashley Babbitts and the white supremacists on Twitter, right? They see a Turk and say, "What's that? That's no different than an Arab. It's no different than an Arab." Right? They're all camel riders. They're all camel riders in the minds of the white supremacists. But in the in the minds of the Turks, or at least the early Republicans, they were looking at the Arabs and say, yeah, those are all camel riders. Those are all backward sand people. Those are the Bedouins. We are not them, right? Because the creation of any sort of identity has to rely on the other, right? Which is how whiteness is maintained in and of itself. Because blackness is the ultimate other to whiteness, even though there is no such thing. There is no such thing as blackness, and there is no such thing as whiteness at a biological level. Yet, and still, we know at a social level it exists because it dominates the minds of the Turks, who were hell bent on trying to prove that they were white, by listening to Western music in front of everybody. But secretly, they want to do the Dabka. You get what I'm saying? I don't know. Continuing here. Continuing here, ironically, the racialized attempts to establish the Turks' innate capacity for modernization ran up against the equally racialized perceptions in the West of the Turks' innate barbarity, vulgarity, and incivility. I repeat, the racialized attempts to establish the Turks' innate capacity for modernization ran up against the equally racialized perceptions in the West of the Turks' innate barbarity, vulgarity, and incivility. On the one hand, the attempts by the elite in Turkey and other non Western regions to adopt Western modernity ultimately depended upon a Western audience as the observer, recorder, and arbiter of success. On the other hand, Western scholarship was at the same time constructing immutable, racialized boundaries between what was perceived as the West and the East, while the elites in non Western settings were adopting modernity to address local issues. Nationalist intellectuals and Western Orientalists disagreed with each other, despite misrepresenting history in parallel ways. In Edmund Burke's phrasing, despite their evident opposition, Orientalism and nationalism are deeply interconnected. Where's Dr. Oz? I should have done a live stream on Dr. Oz a long time ago. Y'all know who Dr. Oz is? He's that Turkish doctor. I believe he was on like that show called The Doctors, daytime television show in America, right? Then he enters into politics and then becomes a MAGA Republican. Becomes a MAGA Republican, and then I believe loses his Senate race or House. Oh God, he tried to run for the House and couldn't even win. Jesus Christ, that's an embarrassment. That's an embarrassment. You run for the House and you can't even win, and your name is Dr. Oz, national celebrity, right? Anyway, Dr. Oz now became a MAGA Republican and just cosplayed for white for many years. Nobody knew Dr. Oz was really Turkish until like years later. You get what I'm saying? Because he was trying to play this role that he's this waspy, Anglo-Saxon, like crypto-Saxon, crypto-wasp. And slid through the doors with all that stuff. And of course he was talking hella anti-black, because that's what's natural for a Republican. For a MAGA Republican, talking anti-black is just a part of the deal. Right? So yeah, very interesting. Very interesting that, you know, the Turkish Republicans, they were trying to be white so bad, but the whites were saying that they were barbarians, and they were basically doing all of this to appease them and entertain them, and to hopefully just be accepted by them. Oh, ain't that crazy? In fact, Turkish race sciences that were intended to fight Western racial misconceptions had their roots in the West, and the Republican Westernization only speeded up the search for solutions in the certainty of racial classifications. One of the early markers in this development was the Pontus issue, Pontus Meselesi, a book published by the Ankara government in 1922 before the establishment of the Republican regime. The rush to print the manuscript during the heat of territorial debates at the Lausanne Peace Conference indicates that the goal was mainly to refute Pontic claims to northeast Anatolia. Still, by insisting that the Turkish race was the original inhabitant of the Anatolian territory, and by establishing racial links with the Sumerians and Hittites, the book signals some of the more zealous race theories of the 1930s. Now that's just crazy. Like everybody knows, at least in, even then they knew better. They knew better than to say that they were related to the Sumerians and Hittites. The Turks might have, some relation because they've interbred and mixed with the people of Arabic descent and Kurdish descent who have been there for a long ass time, and the Persians as well. But everybody knows, like, the Turks showed up in what, like the year 900, or the year 1000 of our Lord in Anatolia. Like, what are they talking about? That's crazy. Anyway, the fact that the Turkish parliament republished the book in 1995 is only another testament to the continuity of racial discourses. Only 3 years later, the Center for Anthropological Research was established as an institute under the Faculty of Medicine in Istanbul. The center and its scholarly journal, the Turkish Journal of Anthropology, provide one of the earliest examples of race science in the service of constructing Turkish identity. The high point of Republican race science, however, occurred in the 1930s when a large-scale cultural mobilization began to actively manufacture a white European Turkish identity. This mobilization was nourished by two scholarly streams, biometrics and anthropometrics. Biometric scholarship was a forward-looking project that aimed at eliminating racially harmful elements in the service of racial progress. So basically eugenics. Like, the Turks were trying to do eugenics too. They were looking into eugenics. You get what? That's crazy. All right. Inspired by European and North American eugenic currents, it proposed measures to protect and improve the Turkish race. Despite close links and overlaps, however, this body of scholarship was not simply a replication of Western eugenics. Turkish biometric scholars tried to adapt eugenics to the particular demands of their own nationalism. While the model for this racial interventionism was Nazi Germany, the policy applications in the Turkish case were not as extreme and remained within the scholarly discourses of medical scientists. Despite some efforts to disseminate eugenic knowledge to the larger population, anthropometric research, on the other hand, looked backward to seek out the racial essences of Turks in the ancient past under the tutelage of such disciplines as history, archaeology, and linguistics, often funded within the help of Western scholars and scholarship. Imagine Gattaca in Turkey. Imagine there was Gattaca in Turkey. All right, the links between Western eugenic sciences and Turkish biometrics, in which intellectual exchange was limited to the movement of ideas through publications and translations, lacked the close personal encounters that existed between Western and local scholars and anthropometric research, as we will see in Chapter 5 in the case of Western emigre scholars. As a result, anthropometrics was the dominant partner and received much more attention in the scholarship on Turkey. Although biometric research played a significant role in Republican Turkey's engagement with modernity and the development of the taxonomic discourse. Jump into the comments here. Donnie Williams says, I consider them whites. Okay, they're whites if they are, basically claiming superiority, if they are saying that other groups of people are inferior, if that's what you imply as whites. But I'll ask you the same question, Donnie, that I asked the Turkish fellow who came in here. What is whiteness? Who are whites? And what is white supremacy? Because I think that is more important. Because guess what, Donnie? There is no such thing as white people. There is nobody who is translucent. Whiteness is a social construct that has a certain meaning. It does not mean anything in and of itself. There were no white people 1,000 years ago. There was no such thing as blackness as 1,000 years ago. These are ever expanding, elastic uh, um, social norms that we just sort of buy into. 100 years ago, pink was a masculine color. You would dress a baby boy up in pink in America and a little girl in blue. These things are not static. These things are not concrete. They are not real. They are not real. But I ask you again, Donnie, what is whiteness? Who is white? And what is white supremacy? Nobody wants to answer because nobody actually wants to have an intellectual discussion. People just want to say platitudes. Continuing here. Biometric mobilization to protect and improve the race. The spread of eugenic scholarship in Turkey began in the interwar period and ended with the German defeat in World War II, a period in which eugenic scholarship and policies were wreaking havoc not only in Germany, but also in the United States and throughout Europe. Biometric mobilization in the Turkish context, which emerged out of medical research, sociobiology, and eugenics, constitutes a relatively unknown field of scholarship. The lack of research on Republican biometrics hinges on the assumption that its proponents were simply a group of eccentric, if not mad, scientists, clearly outside the scientific and political mainstream. On the contrary, however, scholars of biometrics occupied respectable positions because biometrics translated global scientific trends into locally usable forms. Taking the empirical reality of biometrics seriously not only reveals the biological side of Turkish racial vocabularies, but also shows the extent to which biometrics spilled over into cultural, social, and political debates, and illustrates the prominence of biometric scholarship in academic circles, popular venues, and the government. In fact, scholars with biometric interests conceptualize eugenic policies as a requirement of modern government. Wow. Despite differences in analytical and temporal emphases, biometric work was closely intertwined with anthropometrics insofar as debates about the control of reproduction, physical education, personal hygiene, and the treatment of disease were formulated with the purpose of reviving and protecting anthropometric essences. So basically what they're saying when they're talking about, anthropometrics, from my understanding, they're saying like we need to maintain the purity of the Turks. I think it would have been much easier if Mr. Murat Ergin wrote that the early Republicans were trying to do a eugenics program, or at least theorizing a eugenics program in Turkey that would keep the purity of the Turkish race rather than improving it. because they want to try to maintain some ties to the Sumerians and the Hittites and all the other people that existed for thousands of years and disappeared before the Turks even showed up in Anatolia. But for some reason, the Republicans felt like, yay, we got to claim that we are also a part of them so we can feel a part of whiteness. We can lie, we can make up stuff, we can just be deluded out of our minds to get to our goal of being white, right? So yeah, that's what I think he's trying to get at here. And I find it very interesting that governments at this time were really considering like eugenics programs. I mean, in America, we practice some eugenics, right? There was the forced sterilization of people who were considered mentally handicapped. There was forced sterilization of black men and black women for decades. There was forced sterilization in America of certain Native American tribes and people like that. So it's it's so crazy to think about how different the world is then and how it is now. But unfortunately, a lot of the ideas of back then still hold up now, right? 100 something years ago, it would have been normal for people to say, yeah, maybe certain groups of people shouldn't get married because that can dilute the blood of this race and make this race of people have negative outcomes, right? Like, there are people who believe that then, and that would have been a scientist talking to you. Now, somebody who will say that will be the commenter under my YouTube video or some faceless anon on Twitter. But yet and still, how do those ideas continue to exist? So Donnie Williams, once again, did not answer the question. He's not actually here to engage. He just wants to throw out platitudes. I knew somebody was going to say Martha Singer. Martha Singer, right? Martha Singer, apparently this woman who created Planned Parenthood as a form of eugenics program to get rid of black people. I knew this conspiracy theory was going to come up. I was trying to sidestep it. I was trying to do the Euro step around it. But I have a right-wing audience. I have a goddamn right-wing audience, and all I do is talk left-wing. Oh, God, how did I end up here? What did I do wrong? How did I fail in life so much that I have a right-wing conspiratorial audience? I don't know. But let's talk about Margaret Singer, who I believe her name is Margaret Singer, not Martha Singer. I could be wrong. But yes, she was an old racist white woman in the early 20th century who did believe in eugenics and the inferiority of black people. But I find it problematic that people bring up Margaret Singer's name because now what they're really trying to do is say black people should be on the side of the pro-life camp, who wants to ban abortions and make women die and babies die by forcing them to give birth, right? Anyway, when people bring up Margaret Singer now, they're basically trying to talk about, we need to be on conservative right-wing politics. We need to now be anti-abortion. We need to now be dictating what women do with their bodies. You did not answer the question. You did not answer the question, Donnie. Donnie jumped in and said, I did my best to answer the question. I did not see your answer in the chat. You did not answer the basic three questions. What is whiteness? Who is white? And what is white supremacy? You didn't answer that because I got a right-wing audience who only knows 4chan memes. I have a right-wing audience that believes the stupid stuff that comes out of people like Donald Trump's mouth. I have a right-wing audience that thinks that voting is not important. I have a right-wing audience that doesn't like to read books. I have a right-wing audience that thinks that there's some inferiority with black people. I have a right-wing audience that worships guns. I have a right-wing audience that's homophobic. I have a right-wing audience that's hateful and bigoted. And I don't know what I did wrong. As a communist, as a socialist, as a person with left-leaning ideals who's always trying to educate people and be on the advancement of progress for all human people, how I got a goddamn right-wing audience full of stupid, stupid people. What did I do wrong? God, take my soul from me now. Let me have a stroke. Let me have a heart attack because I have stupid people in my chat who don't like to read and don't actually want to engage in anything. They are believers of stupid, stupid right-wing ideas. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I'm going off right now, but I've been holding this inside. What did I do wrong? I need y'all to tell me in the chat, what am I doing wrong to attract stupid right-wing people in my comment section? I wish I could press a button now and redo everything I did on this channel. Because maybe if I was talking right-wing cap, right-wing BS, I would actually have left-wing people in my audience. I should have been a troll. I should have been a troll the entire time. I should have been a troll the entire time. Maybe then. I would have had some intellectuals in here. Maybe then I wouldn't have people who follow a demagogue in here. Yet and still, I'm a failure. I failed, guys. I failed. Donnie, you were America is a goddamn idiot. Anybody who spends a single dollar to support the gun manufacturing industry in America is a goddamn imbecile. You, Donnie Williams, are the reason why in America we are for certain to have another mass shooting of kids. You, Donnie Williams, are the reason why black men die every single year from gun violence. You, Donnie Williams, are the reason why women are killed by their boyfriends and husbands every single year. Because dumbasses like you continue to put money in the pockets of the people who don't care about American lives. Yes, I called you an idiot. And that's a compliment. Because even worse, you are a devil. Anybody who worships the gun in America is a satanic person. You are an evil, wicked person. And yes, you are an idiot because you bought into that stupid culture that murders people. And you don't even answer basic, stupid questions like who is white, what is whiteness, and what is white supremacy. After listening to my channel for years, Donnie, and everybody else who's been on my channel, you should be able to answer the question, what is white supremacy at the very least? I have failed as an educator. I have failed as a streamer. I have failed as a YouTuber because my audience is full of people who can't even answer basic questions. Acting came in here and said, Simon, you're not responsible for anyone. Don't put that pressure on yourself. I feel like I have to put this pressure on myself because I feel like I've done the absolute best with my words and my effort and my channel and my platform. I've tried to do the absolute best I could. And yet, what and still do I get? I have gun nut worshipers on my channel. I have Trump supporters on my channel. I have conservative, Republican, right-wing, homophobic, anti-woman nuts on my channel. Why? I don't know. I'm continuing with the book here. I'm so glad I got that off my chest. Continuing here. A brief look at the career of Saadi Ermak, one of the most important early Republican eugenicists, demonstrates that early Republican biometrics was not simply an anomalous field populated by marginal figures. Born in 1904, Ermak attended Ottoman primary and secondary schools before the newly established Republican regime sent him to Germany in 1925 to study medicine and biology. In this sense, Ermak belonged to one of the earlier cohorts of government-supported and regime-friendly academics trained abroad. In 1929, he returned to Turkey as a medical doctor with a degree from the University of Berlin. Just 1 year before the university reform of 1933, Ermak passed an exam to join the medical faculty at Istanbul University as a professor of physiology. During the chaos of university reform, which entailed the dismissal of more than half the existing faculty, Ermak and a number of other eugenically inclined professors, such as Fahrettin Kerim Gökay and Mazhar Osman Uzman, kept their jobs. During the 10-year period between 1933 and 1943, Ermak established his authority in the field of biology of race and heredity and offered it in the service of the Nationalist Project. Ermak's presentation at the Second Turkish Historical Congress in 1937, titled Studies on the Biology of the Turkish Race, Blood Types, and Fingerprints, was printed immediately after the Congress as a separate booklet. Although the proceedings of the Congress had to wait until 1943 to be published, Ermak first ventured into party politics in 1943 when he was elected to parliament. To put this election into context, it is important to note that before the institution of free and popular elections in 1950, the single-party ruling elite virtually handpicked parliamentarians. Between June 7th, 1945 and August 5th, 1946, Ermak served as the Minister of Labor. The governmental positions that Ermak occupied indicate that there was no friction between him and the political establishment during the period when his biometric research program was at its most energetic. Ermak returned to university life in 1950 and following a 3-year stay at the University of Munich in Germany, worked for most of his academic career at the University of Istanbul as a professor of physiology. His post-1950 work changed considerably as, following a worldwide trend, Ermak grew more and more distant from overtly eugenic agendas. It is unclear whether the transformation was a sign of regret, since Ermak never even acknowledged his earlier work, nor did the previous research ever haunt his later political and academic career. In the early 1970s, Ermak reappeared in the political arena, this time as a senior figure appointed by the military. during a political crisis. The president of Turkey gave Ermak super party status in order to form a new cabinet. Although his government eventually failed to secure a vote of confidence by the parliament, he served as the prime minister of Turkey between November 17th, 1974 and March 31st, 1975. Following the military coup of 1980, the junta picked him to serve as the Speaker of the Consultative Assembly, which prepared a new constitution. This string of prestigious academic and political appointments made it clear that Ermak was in no way outside the mainstream. So basically, what they're trying to say there is that a scientist in early Republican Turkey ended up becoming the prime minister, and he basically rose to prominence with studies and writings on eugenics, the idea that we need to improve the race, improve la raza, mejor la raza, as the Mexicans like to say. All right, I'm reading into the comments. Elo, don't explain it to me, said Acti. He's the one. He's the one. All this shit he says about me ain't true. Donnie said, all this stuff I'm saying about him ain't true. Donnie, you love the gun. You love the gun. On your channel, all you have are gun photos. And I didn't see in the chat where you answered the question. It shouldn't be that hard. Donnie, I think Simon is just really passionate about these topics, said Ozzy. Donnie said, totally went off on me. Absolutely. Anybody who loves guns in America, I'll go off on your ass any day. I'm really waiting for one of you Second Amendment people to really put that bullet to the test between my forehead. Since y'all really want to love the gun, since that Second Amendment right is more worthy than the lives of Americans, how about y'all do something actually about it and get rid of the people that you think are undesirables in America, since you believe that having a gun is more important than actually protecting American lives. All right, I'm interested in this book. I will be finished out of this live. If I don't get it apology, I'll be leaving with my subscription. Listen, man, I don't care if anybody subscribes. I'm not going to apologize. I will never apologize to a gun owner. What do I look like apologizing to a person who has been cucked by the gun industry? What do I look like apologizing to a person who believes, yeah, having a gun makes me a man, makes me American, makes me free? What do I look like apologizing to a bitch? Fuck I look like. I'm a goddamn man. I'm a man. I ain't no bitch. I don't believe in owning no guns to make me safe, make me free. Fuck I look like. Apologizing to a gun owner. A gun owner. A gun owner. A Neanderthal. A Neanderthal. May I continue? The term eugenics was coined in 1883 by the British scientist Francis Galton, 1822 to 1911. The general object of the study of eugenics, according to Galton, was to take note of the varied hereditary faculties of different men and of the great differences in different families and races, to learn how far history may have shown the practicability of supplanting inefficient human stock by better strains. Eugenics has a connection to social Darwinism insofar as both the intellectual currents downplay the significance of social forces in the condition of individuals, ascribing problems such as poverty and disease to naturally occurring differences between the biological makeup of various individuals and groups. There is a significant difference between these two currents, though. Darwinist catchphrases such as the survival of the fittest signal a willingness to let natural processes do the job of genetic selection, while eugenics stresses the importance of human intervention in socio-biological processes. For example, for Galton, eugenics implied exerting ourselves to further the ends of evolution more rapidly and with less distress than if events were left to their own course. Carl Pearson, inspired by Galton's work, applied statistical methods to the transfer of hereditary characteristics and was one of the major scholars to transmit eugenics to the United States. Charles Davenport, the most notable representative of eugenics in the United States, insisted on the individual nature of biological characteristics. No race, per se, he reportedly argued, whether Slovak, Ruthenian, Turk, or Chinese, is dangerous and undesirable. Despite his individualistic eugenics, Davenport was not hesitant to identify the white Protestant majority as generally having a good stock and did not oppose racially conceived immigration and sterilization laws. Even in its most individualistic rhetoric, however, eugenics carried a deeply racial and gendered agenda, rooted in its origins as a response to changing race and gender hierarchies. Very interesting. Very interesting. What I'm understanding there is that, these scientists at the time in the early Republican Turkey, sure, they weren't talking about sterilizing people, but they were using race form the national identity, right? And they were concerned, the early scientists were concerned on how they were going to preserve the race of the Turks, right? Ozzy says, Donnie, don't leave. Donnie Williams says, battery in his back. I don't have a battery in my back. I stand against the tide. I am the one American, or one of the minority of Americans, who believe people who worship the gun are the true enemies of America. How are you expecting me to apologize to a gun owner, but you want to apologize to the kids at Sandy Hook? You want to apologize to the people that got murdered in Buffalo? You won't apologize to the innocents that will be murdered in the future because you continue to support the industry that puts the battery in the back of the politicians who continue to brainwash Americans to buy guns and allow an 18-year-old, a 17-year-old, a 16-year-old to get their hands on weapons to commit mass atrocities. But I need to apologize to a person who does not care about human life. They care about more a stupid ass right that racist slave owners made up hundreds of years ago to dictate the lives of black men. No militia, we shall not encumber a militia. Something like that is what the Second Amendment says. That was created so white men could deputize each other to hunt down black men who wanted to be free. But y'all use that as an excuse to say, man, I gotta own a gun. But we ain't gonna use it for freedom. We ain't gonna use it for freedom. I need to. Okay, Donnie Williams, I'm gonna ask you this question. You didn't answer the question about whiteness. You didn't answer the question about whiteness, and I'm projecting. I'm projecting when let's follow the money. Let's actually walk through what I'm saying and what people like you would say. People like you would say, Donnie Williams, we need to own guns. Why? Because I need to protect myself, and I'm a responsible gun owner. And the weapons that I have, I make sure they're safe. I make sure they're clean. I make sure that, I don't use them irresponsibly. I don't keep them around kids, all that sort of stuff. That might be true for you, but you are still supporting an industry that murders people every single year because every illegal gun that floods Chicago, every illegal gun that takes the lives of my friends and my family, all were bought legally. They all flood the streets legally. You might be the legal gun owner, but there are other people who are legal gun owners who then flood those markets, flood those guns into the black market. You might be the gun owner that doesn't allow his kids to get it out the closet, but there are other parents like the ones in Michigan who allowed their son to take a gun to school and damn near shoot up the whole school. Yes, people like you. Think about this, guys. Think about this. If I believed, and in fact, I do believe this, and I know I should act differently. If I believed that McDonald's was one of the reasons why people were obese in America, and obesity is a major killer of people in America, would I be hypocritical if I went to go shop at McDonald's? If obesity is one of the major killers, heart disease, diabetes, all those sorts of things. If I go buy at fast food restaurants, am I not supporting an industry that is killing Americans? Guns are the number one killer of people under the age of 18. Where do you think that money goes when you buy those semi-automatic rifles, those pistols, those bullets, those holsters, those bulletproof vests, whatever y'all buy at that stores? Where does that money go? Do you think it goes to the Bernie Sanders of the world who want more gun control? Or do you think it goes to the Republican conservatives of the world who say bump stocks don't make an AK-47 an automatic rifle? Now, Donnie Williams isn't even actually talking about his ideas. He's just saying, well, but it's okay to disagree. So it's not okay to disagree about this issue. This is the stupid thing about Americans. Americans are fucking stupid. And the crazy thing is, Donnie Williams comes from a country, or at least his mama or his daddy comes from a country where they have sensible gun laws. I don't think the people of Portugal are any better than Americans. I don't think they're smarter than Americans. I don't think they have any more higher moral standing than Americans. But let's compare the gun death violence in Portugal to the gun death violence of just one state in America. Just one state. Pick a state. Pick a state in America. Pick a state in America. 9 times out of 10, the one you're going to pick has more gun deaths with a similar size population or less than Portugal. But I digress. But Americans think we need more guns, right? Stupid Americans. But I should apologize to a gun owner. But they won't apologize to the kids that'll be killed because they're funding an industry that is literally death. Stupid Americans. Stupid Americans. Continuing here. Starting at the turn of the century, eugenics steadily rose to unprecedented levels of popularity on both sides of the Atlantic. A chronic sense of pessimism about the demographic future of humanity helped convince many of the imminent dangers of racial degeneration and thus legitimized eugenic policy measures. Soon, eugenic movements had sprung up in other countries, such as Sweden, Norway, Russia, Switzerland, Germany, Poland, France, Italy, and later in Japan and Latin America. A wide array of social and medical problems was defined within the fields of eugenics. There was a flurry of legal enactments in the United States and Europe explicitly aimed at producing a eugenically sound human society by either limiting the procreation of those considered to be genetically inferior, negative eugenics, or encouraging the reproduction of those considered to be genetically superior, positive eugenics. For example, an average annual number of 2,273 eugenic sterilizations were performed in the United States in the 1930s as a result of legal enactments. There was also a parallel move to educate the public about eugenics. For example, with displays at state and country fairs that made the claim that unfit human traits such as feeble-mindedness, epilepsy, criminality, insanity, alcoholism, pauperism, and many others run in families and are inherited in exactly the same way as color in guinea pigs. The same language about the inheritance of criminality, epilepsy, insanity, and other negative characteristics was transplanted virtually unchanged into the Turkish context by local scholars. Despite their working within a different cultural setting and set of expectations, Sadi Ermek was especially fond of citing alarming stories of families full of criminals, feeble-minded individuals, and whores for the purpose of establishing the genetic sources of undesirable characteristics. These anecdotes were derived from two case studies, now highly criticized, of the Kalikat family in a 1912 book by Henry H. Goddard, tracing feeble-mindedness, and the Juke family in an 1877 book by Richard L. Dugdale, studying criminality. All right. Contemporary scientific work on genes, genomes, genealogies, euthanasia seem to feed from past eugenic assumptions. However, because eugenics as a concept is in general disrepute today, research into history and contemporary legacy of eugenic research has become a politically charged and widely debated arena. The discomfort surrounding eugenics in the post-war world can easily cause lapses of memory, and surprises are likely to occur when one digs into the historical record and uncovers links between nationalist elites and eugenics. In Turkey, too, the project of anthropometrics was assiduously developed by medical scholars working at universities, actively supported by the government, and ardently disseminated to popular audiences through conferences and publications. The premise of Turkish biometrics was no different from its counterparts in other parts of the world. The belief in a firm link between the social and biological. The belief in this pseudo-scientific link led to eugenic ideas being disseminated as the crowning glory of modernity, and to the conceptualization of common social policy measures, such as those concerning public health, population growth, or agricultural developments in the context of the need to improve Turkish racial stock. Biometric research, in conjunction with its anthropometric counterpart, was seen as both a tool for and a sign of Turkish modernization. As a tool, it would accelerate the pursuit of modernization, but the very existence of this body of knowledge was seen as a symbol of the modernization that Turkey had already achieved. Okay. Donnie Williams says, no, you should apologize for trying to insult me. I'll apologize when you put a gun to my head. How about that, Mr. Gunnut? Mr. Gunnut. Mr. Gunnut, put that barrel in my mouth after you take it out of your mouth from sucking on it all day. No, I don't have to apologize to anybody. I don't have to apologize to anybody who worships the gun on this channel. And Donnie Williams, I see why you got cucked by the NRA. I see why you got cucked by the gun manufacturers. I see why you got cucked by the stupid American culture that worships death and disregards life. I can see why, because you're still on this channel after you said, I'm going to take my subscription. I'm going to walk away. I'm going to walk away. Go ahead and walk away. Go to a gun range. Go to a gun range and blow your brains out. Because we need less people in this world who worship guns. We need less people in America who want to continue to support this industry financially. Donnie Williams said, I'm probably the only black here, and he's going off on me. Donnie Williams, you might be black, but that don't mean you're on the side of fighting against white supremacy. Because the flooding of the black community with guns is a tactic that the white supremacists are used to literally kill ourselves. Donnie Williams, Donnie Williams, you gotta be stupid as fuck. You gotta be dumb as fuck to think that the guns flooding the black community are not a part of the genocide that they're trying to make us commit. The number one killer, this is not a lie. This is the truth. The number one killer of black men is gun violence. Is that the case in Canada? Is that the case in France? Is that the case in Germany? Is that the case in Africa? There's not even an African country, other than maybe South Africa, where the number one killer of black men is gun violence. Talk about comprehension. You can't even comprehend the simple idea that you are supporting the killing of American black children. You stupid son of a bitch. God damn. Avery Adams says, what the hell is going on? What did I miss? I'm going off. I'm going off today. I'm trying to commit a purge. I'm committing a purge right now. I'm purging this community. He blew on me because I'm preconceived notions. Everybody go to go to Donnie Williams' channel. What do you see on there? What do you see on there? What do y'all see on Donnie Williams' channel? I talked about your mama, Donnie Williams, because she actually came from a place that has a better conception of human life than what we have in America. In Portugal, a country of about, 10 million people? Let's say we got, 10 million people in Florida? Which state, which place has a higher percentage of black people dying from gun violence? Which place has more children dying from gun violence? Is it Portugal, an entire nation, or just one U.S. state with the same population? Your hobby is supporting death. Donnie Williams says, my hobby is just my hobby. Your hobby is funding the people that don't care about human life. But I should apologize. I'm going to always go off on a gun owner. I will always go off on a gun owner. And if y'all don't like what I have to say, use them goddamn guns. I'll drop my location. Bring that stupid American culture to Hungary. Or I'll pop up wherever y'all at. Y'all can pop my shit. Because I'm sick of this. I'm sick of this world. I'm sick of this world. I want to leave this world. I want to leave this world. Seriously. I will drop my location. Taking it too far? What's taking it too far? I want to ask everybody. Is somebody speaking out against America's gun culture, where other countries don't have a similar culture and they have a much better, healthier society, where their kids don't die in school, where their old people aren't murdered accidentally, just passing by, where young black men don't die from gun violence, even in an African nation? Think about that. Kenya is damn near all black. What's the number one killer of kids in Kenya? Probably like malaria or something. But in America, the richest nation of the world, the richest nation in the world, the number one killer of black children is what? What's the number one killer of black children? It's what Donnie Williams calls a hobby. It's just a hobby. It's just a hobby. It's just a hobby. Supporting white supremacists who want to put more guns in our hoods, want to put more guns in the hands of young black men. But y'all don't hear me though. Y'all don't hear me though. Y'all don't hear me though. Y'all don't hear me though. I'm taking it too far. But the people who have a sick culture where kids die, they're not taking it too far, right? Don't happen in Canada. It doesn't happen in Spain. Doesn't happen in Mrs. Williams, Portugal. It don't happen there. But in America, we're taking it too far by calling out the sick people who worship the gun. Put that barrel in your mouth, suck it, and blow your brains out. Continuing here. Biometric concerns in Turkey crystallized into three areas: population, reproduction, and heredity. Biometric arguments effectively turn population regulation into a matter of bolstering Turkey's economic power and internal and international competitiveness. Efforts at the scientific management of the Turkish population were not limited to meeting the need for rapid population growth, but also included matters such as the relationship between agricultural production and the food requirements of the existing population, the physical and intellectual education of citizens, and the influence of the climate on different population groups. The measures to improve the population qualitatively were seen as important important as the measures to improve it numerically. The large body of research and the public debate about preventing and treating epidemics in this period addressed, sometimes implicitly and sometimes explicitly, the need to improve the hereditary qualities of Turks and to create a strong and healthy nation. All right. In fact, government officials saw the mobilization for disease control as an extension of national policy, rather than as a means to reduce the suffering of citizens, whose individual bodies mattered primarily in the context of their contribution to the health and strength of the national body. In the words of Mazhar Osman Usman, a notable psychiatrist after whom a major mental hospital in Istanbul today is named, a person proves that he is a good citizen by protecting his life. This positive obligation to the state to remain healthy was mirrored by the negative obligation to avoid becoming a burden on the nation. As phrased by one medical professor in a lecture on accident prevention, consider what would be the use to himself and his country of a child who lost both of his legs. He is bound to live as a parasite on the back of society, and society is bound to feed him. This short but callous eruption in an otherwise technical presentation reveals just how insignificant individuals were in the face of the nation's need for growing healthy bodies. This concept of parasitic individuals was an important metaphorical device for establishing the importance of fit individuals and connecting their significance to larger issues. In the context of governmental population policies, unhealthy individuals were considered parasites. They were in need of other individuals in society's help, yet they tended to exploit the feelings of sympathy they evoked. On the other hand, healthy bodies were the wealth of society. Hence, they were the only means by which society could succeed, defend its homeland, and make progress. So basically, the state is trying to promote health and wealth and fitness amongst the people of Turkey. I believe in Turkey, and Akdi can tell me this if I'm right or wrong. I believe in Turkey they have like the National Day of Youth and a National Day of Sports where they're trying to like promote kids to do activities and be healthy, which is actually a positive thing. But I find it interesting that that holiday probably has its roots in the eugenics of the nation, wanting to create a better society, or the healthy Turk as the basis of society, right? So Acti says he's passionate, but he's right when it comes to guns. I love my wife. So Donnie Williams says, I'm sure he does it like he's looking for an argument, though. He went too far. I went too far. I went too far. This is the only argument. I went too far. My rhetoric is wrong. But the millions of black people who have lost their lives to gun violence at the hands of white supremacists and at the hands of other black people, that's not going too far. But we worship the gun, right? Nothing surpasses our God. Nothing surpasses our God, where we put our babies on the altar for and then shoot them with AK-47s through the forehead every single year. This is what America could do. How about this? We make a deal with God. God, come down here. We will kill a baby every single year just so we can keep our guns. And God would say, you sick American fucks. God would come down and say that to Americans. I did not insult your mother. The only reason I would insult her is if she moved to America because she wanted her son to own a gun. But I don't think she wanted that. She probably wanted you to move to America, Donnie, to achieve the American dream. But as soon as you landed on those shores, you should have realized you're living in the American nightmare, because the number one killer of black men in America for the past few years has been gun violence. And the nightmare is there are black men who buy into the propaganda that the white supremacists feed us, that the gun makes us American, the gun makes us free, the gun protects us from a tyrannical government. But ain't no black men trying to run up in the Capitol. Ain't no black men pulling a Chris Dorner. Ain't no black men doing a DC sniper. Ain't no black men doing no black angels of death from San Francisco. If you know, you know. If you know, you know. If you know, I'm talking real heavy right now. Y'all need to do your research on some real black writers. But instead, all we got are some black cock dick writers of the white supremacists because they worship the gun. Donnie Williams can't even argue against why having guns is necessary. He can't even give me a good reason. Goddamn. Goddamn. All right. So he covered mass shootings for a year every single day and had to face all the death caused in America. It's a lifelong argument for him because it's sad that the greatest nation on earth is killing itself. I will be happy to give my arms away if I know everybody else too will protect the community. Listen, I know I'm throwing shots at Donnie Williams, but Avery's catching strays too. I love my guy Avery, but I'm going to stand on business for real. But this is the thing. I once was a gun owner. I wish I had the pictures. If y'all can find my own Facebook, Simon Nicholas Hill. Type in Simon Nicholas Hill on Facebook. You could probably find my old Facebook when I was living in Miami, and I recorded a stupid video where I made a selfie with me rapping and my AK-47 was on my bed. And I thought that was cool. I thought I needed a gun. I thought it made me manly. But then I'll never forget, there was a mass shooting in Washington. There was a mass shooting where somebody walked into a university and slaughtered 4 people, then shot himself. And that was just another Tuesday. And I really said that I don't know why that mass shooting, because if you're in America, we hear mass shootings every single day and we think, oh, just another Thursday. Oh, that's crazy. But I don't know why. For some reason, that mass shooting in Washington touched me. Hearing the story of some kid walking into a college dorm room or college classroom and laying down 4 people, ending his own life, and that's no justice. And we have to continue. We have to continue to just live with that normalcy. And I grew up with guns. I'm from the South. My dad still got all the straps in the house. Shotguns, pistols, rifles, all sorts of stuff. There has to be a point. There has to be a point when we as individuals and take personal responsibility. I know what the conservatives like to say, that we need to take personal responsibility. We need to take personal responsibilities as men in our nation, as leaders of our families, as black men in our community, to say, I don't care if you're not going to do it, I'm going to do it. We don't have this same mentality for everybody else. We don't have this same mentality for everything else in life. We don't say, you know what, I'm going to go to college if I see other people go to college. I'm going to eat healthy if I see other people eat healthy. I'm going to go to the gym if I see other people go to the gym. I'm going to not slap my wife if I see other people not slap their wife. But when it comes to guns, now we think, I'm going to hold my gun as long as you got your gun. When are we, the supposedly Christian nation, when are we, supposedly men who stand on business, going to say enough is enough with the gun violence? And I'm going to put mine down. In any war, in any conflict, in any fight, somebody eventually has to put the arms down. And if you're too pussy to do that, we're going to continue to live in the cycle of violence. And that's a fact. And I know I'm throwing a lot of strays at Donnie, because Donnie's been hella quiet. All he says is, you're going too far, you're going too far. But he's not listening. You don't care about black life if you love the gun. You don't actually care about black women if you love the gun. You don't care about black children if you love the gun. Because every single dollar you spend does not even go into black hands. Think about this, man. There is no black gun manufacturer in America that is seriously a top 10 contender. When you're spending your money, who are you spending your money with? Where does that money go? Do you think that goes to the Koch brothers? Do you think that goes to the Sackler family? Don't you think that goes to people who would, rather see us go back to 1866? You don't think that money goes into the hands of people who hate the idea of black progress? Of course it does. Because the proponents of the gun culture in America were traditionally the white supremacists. The very basis of the Second Amendment is based on the idea that they need to create deputies of people to police black men in the case of a revolution, revolt, or escape. It was illegal for black men to own guns. But y'all want to use that as a reason now we need to own guns now because they made it illegal. But y'all don't think that way about voting. Come on, man. All right. Donnie Williams said, I'm too pussy. You're correct again. See, he's saying that shit to try to be coy. Donnie Williams saying this shit. I'm too pussy. Like I wouldn't say this to your face. I wouldn't say this to the face. And what you gonna do, Donnie? Shoot me? Slap me? Kill me? Because all you know how to is resort to violence? Because you're not a man who knows how to use his words, his tongues, and his gift to express himself? Because you still didn't even answer the question, what is whiteness? What is white supremacy? And who is white? You didn't answer those questions because you're a person who wants to resort to violence. That's the reason you have to have a gun. Donnie Williams says, so how would you defend yourself if someone breaks in your house, Simon? I got these hands and I'm willing to die. I got these hands and I'm willing to die. I got these hands and I'm willing to die. What happened to the good old days of brass knuckles, baseball bats, and just a good old-fashioned belt? Someone's going to say, well, what if someone break in your house with a strap? Listen, Unfortunately, y'all are deciding to live in a country and not take personal responsibility to try to actually create a better gun culture in America or eliminate it at all. So then you'll just be dead then. So man, hey, bro, hey, I gotta have the gun because what if somebody breaking my house, bro? And then I be dead. I was gonna be dead. I gotta have a gun. Simple and plain. Listen, Donnie, when other people break into houses in Portugal, do you think they have to live with the constant threat of them being dead because somebody broke in their house? No, because the guns are not permeating in their society. It's a two-pronged thing. It's a two-pronged thing. We have to take personal responsibility to get the guns out of our hands and also advocate for the government to get the guns out of all these gun nuts' hands, like you, and get them off of the streets and get the illegal guns off the street. Avery said, we need this Simon 24/7. Listen, man, listen, I'm sorry I'm going off. I'm sorry I'm going off, but I really needed to purge this channel because it's bothering me. It's bothering me. It's bothering me that I can't have people even answer the question, what is white supremacy? I've asked this and nobody has put this in the topic yet. Nobody's even answered that question. What is whiteness? All the years I've given on this channel, all the years of me coming on live for hours and hours on end, talking about whiteness, talking about white supremacy. Donnie Williams says, at me when you apologize. When you apologize? When I apologize, I'll at you the next time there's a mass shooting, Donnie. The next time 20 kids get killed in a school, tick, tick, tick, tick, tick, 2024, sometime this month. The next time some white supremacist walks into a supermarket to murder all the Asian people, tick, tick, tick, tick, tick, tick, tick, sometime this year. The next time somebody, murders their entire family, execution style, Donnie, little Jimmy kills his daddy, his brother, and his dog all together, execution style with daddy's gun. I'll be sure to at you, Donnie. Tick, tick, tick, tick, tick, tick. Oh, that probably happened today. Probably happened today. And the next time a Republican politician and a Democrat go on TV and say, thoughts and prayers for the 100 gay people murdered at the club. The next time that happens, Donnie, I'll be sure to at you, buddy. I'll be sure to apologize that I didn't say the right words to keep your sensitive feelings straight. To keep your sensitive feelings straight while the streets run with blood in America, Donnie. I'll be sure to say that. I'll be sure to say that. I'll be sure to say, I'm so sorry, Donnie. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, bro. I'm so sorry, bro. I hurt your feelings while we got 20 dead kids in the school, while we can't have fucking 4th of July parades because they get shot up. I'm so sorry, Donnie, that I can't, I'm so sorry, bro. I'm so sorry, bro. Because you know what? Somebody might break in your house, bro, and you be dead. Simply plain. Simply plain. Break-ins in Canada, break-ins in Germany, break-ins in Italy, break-ins in Spain, break-ins in your mama's Portugal. And don't nobody have to worry about death. Don't nobody have to worry about death. But stupid Americans got to worry about death. I'm sorry I'm ranting. I'm sorry I'm ranting. Sorry I'm ranting. I am sorry I'm ranting. I'm turned up. And this is not, I'm not trying to entertain y'all. I'm not trying to like go extra. I'm really just, I'm really trying to exercise this shit. Anyway. Back on Turkey. Acty, I just need you. You know the talking points. You know the drill. Acty, do we got mass shootings in Turkey? Acty, if you hear in the comment section, do the Turks regularly kill their children for the sake of saying, yeah, bro, at least we free, at least we got guns, at least in the random possibility that somebody's gonna break into my house, if somebody's gonna commit a flock on me? Acty. Anyway, Acty, tell me, do we got mass shootings in Turkey? Do the Turks kill themselves? I'm sorry. Anyway, the biometric focus on reproduction aimed to ensure the continuity of superior hereditary characteristics and to prevent the reproduction of inferior ones. Articles in popular journals champion the strict governmental regulation of marriage as a major instrument of racial hygiene, while also promoting fertility as a national duty to protect and improve the hereditary essence of the Turkish nation. Suggestions made by scholars that marriage be made mandatory drew public attention to the importance of reproduction. Other social issues such as adaptation and divorce were also seen through the lens of international competition for a strong and populous national body. Reproduction brought women to the center of biometric regulation, where their role was viewed through a bifurcated lens. They were at once agents of hereditary purification and bearers of hereditary degeneration. Women could be purifiers not only because they stood for the abstract spirits of everything, of which the nation was proud, but also because they were the carriers of the human material that would take the nation forward in its struggle for dominance in an international context. In this sense, women played a significant role both in the anthropometric project as representatives of the essential characteristic of the nation and in the biometric project as reproducers of future generations. Ermac unequivocally expresses the importance of women to biometrics. The liberation of women is an honorable gain for us. However, even after receiving the highest education, the most important characteristic of women is to be a good wife and a good mother. Women's work in the occupational arena should be restricted so as not to interfere with the duties of motherhood and wifehood. All right. Jump into the comments here. Acti says, no mass shootings in Turkey. Avery Adams said, guess I'm moving to Turkey. Seems safer. Hey, you could have a great time in Istanbul. Balling out of control. Beautiful scenes. Gets really hot in the summer. And it's generally safe. Generally safe. I believe there was the year 2021. There were 86 homicides in all of Istanbul, a city of 10 million people. In Memphis this year. In Memphis, I think around 200 people have been killed in Memphis. Memphis, Tennessee have been killed this year. And in all of Istanbul, only 86 people have been killed. Think about that. That's crazy. How many people have died in New York this year? I think it's close to 100. There's at least 100 homicides per year in New York City alone, which is one of the safer cities in America. But in Memphis, New Orleans, hell, drop a pin on anywhere in the South, streets run with blood. Streets run with blood. Anyway, I find this interesting, talking about how, you know, they liberated women with these new reforms, but also the eugenics at the time wanted to try to restrict women on who they were going to procreate with. I remember when I met Acti. Acti was like all about like evolutionary biology, evolutionary stuff like, survival of the fittest, the strongest will survive, good genes, bad genes, and stuff like that. Like I said, these ideas permeate in a lot of people. There are a lot of people who believe in eugenics still to this day, but it's sort of like distorted now. Like they still believe, okay, black people are naturally stronger, faster, bigger dicks. White people naturally faster, white people naturally smarter, whatever, stuff like that, right? Uh, okay. Ozzy says, U.S. had the most guns per capita in the entire world. In the entire world. More than Somalia? No. More than Sudan? No. More than Nicaragua? No. Are you serious? Acti says, yeah, I said that, but it wasn't about the genes, really, more about opportunities provided to you by your geography and society. Okay, I didn't mean to mischaracterize what you said, Acti. I got love for you, but I'm just saying, even though I'm taking you out of the context, there's still people out there who believe stuff about genes, right? Stuff about genes and people. So continuing here. Ermac was not alone in giving women the difficult task of balancing tradition and modernity. Fehrettin Kerim Gökçe, a prominent eugenicist whose political career was as decorated as Ermac's, he served as the governor of Istanbul, a member of the parliament, and a minister of health, maintained that women's innate skill in the arts and as wives and mothers should limit their involvement in social life outside of the home. While the modernization movement expected women to westernize, eugenics required placing limits on their public participation. After all, as Ermac pointed out, unless kept under biometric control, women's reproduction could be degraded by vices such as prostitution, since prostitution in women is a hereditary characteristic that corresponds to criminality in men. Interesting. They're saying if your mama a hoe, her daughter gonna be a hoe, and his son gonna be a thug. That's crazy. That's funny. That's kind of funny. Anyway, water break. Water break. Mm. Acti says, why didn't we get our share of the modernity? I think Turkey did. Don't you think so? I mean, if you go to Turkey, there are parts of it that are, more urban, like rustic, rural in Istanbul. Let's just think about Istanbul, right? Like Istanbul is like a weirdly built city, right? It's a lot of, oh, you're talking about as women. Ah, okay. Okay. Oh, I get what you're saying. All right. Well, if that's the case, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. But I think they associated modernity with like getting rid of the restrictive parts of Islam. Burqas, niqabs, being the second wife, stuff like that. That's what I think. Uh, so, uh, Avery Adams says, I watch the walking tours all the time. Yeah, beautiful walking tour videos of Istanbul. There are some very nice parts of Istanbul, right? But there are parts that are also like, you definitely don't feel like there are parts of Istanbul that you would not see in like any other like European city, except maybe like Italy or some stuff, right? Like I think there are parts of Italy that might resemble Turkey, but I think that's because Italy has that Mediterranean thing going on. Same thing with Greece too. But yeah. Anyway, I'm tripping. I'm tripping. Um, so, the biometric discussions of heredity focused on both positive and negative genetically transferable characteristics, such as genius and intelligence, criminality, and various physical and mental illnesses. In a rather macabre example of the eugenic interest in genius, Şevket Aziz Kansu, a prominent medical anthropologist, wrote an obituary for a Turkish intellectual in which he listed 43 anthropometric measurements from the cephalic index to height as proof of the racial qualities of the deceased. However, more careful attention was paid to the elimination of inferior elements, for which the Nazi Germany served as a model. Sadi Ermak had already started popularizing eugenics in 1934 when he was a physiology professor at Istanbul University. His book, Hereditary and its Social and Educational Consequences, was published shortly after the infamous Gesetz zur Verhütung Erbrecht. Now, I cannot speak German. Law for the Prevention of Offspring with Hereditary Diseases. That was a Nazi law. That was passed on July 14th, 1933 in Nazi Germany. As admiration for Germany and interwar Turkey steadily increased, positive reports abounded in Turkish biometric circles of the Nazi government's attempts to support sterilization as a means of improving racial hygiene, to promote marriage and reproduction as a way of increasing the population, and to prevent racial intermixing as a way of avoiding national degeneration. Support for Nazi hereditary policies also appeared in popular venues. The semi-official daily newspaper Cumhuriyet reported the passing of the sterilization law in Germany on the first page in an article titled, Should Mad, Feeble-Minded, and Sick People Be Sterilized? The expert whose opinion the newspaper sought was Fehretin Kerim Göke. In his positive evaluation of the Nazi law, Göke presented the development as the practical application of scientific thinking. Similarly, Ermak saw German eugenic policies as a necessity for a modern government. For him, all Turkish intellectuals had to pay attention to what he called the sociology of hereditary, which dealt with issues of degeneration, selection, intelligence, and education. Having established the social significance of biological phenomenon, especially by reference to the German case, all Ermak needed to do was to apply these ideas to Turkey within the already established Republican discursive framework of Turkishness. The German model of mass physical education also provided a convenient model for imitation. The significance of sport was seen in terms of racial improvement, character formation, and national defense. Rather than as a tool for individual development, admiration for German modernity even led Ermak, Göke, and Usman to the assessment that the extermination of German Jews was a rational policy for avoiding racial mixing. Interestingly, according to Inside the Third Rock, the memoir of Albert Speer, the Nazi minister of armaments, Hitler decried the moral limits that Christianity had instilled in the German population and spoke of his admiration for the ruthlessness of the Ottoman Empire. He refers to them as Mohammedans or Arabs, which he wished had conquered Europe and replaced Christianity with Islam. Being an inferior race, they would eventually have been overthrown by Islamized Germans. Ironically, while the Republican Turks were admiring Hitler's German modernity, Hitler Hitler was admiring Ottoman Islamist primitivism. Interesting. Um, yeah, very, very interesting that, the Turks were, taking in everything with modernity. And this is the thing, right? Like, okay, of course, Turkish people should adopt like from the West. I don't know, modern medicine, modern infrastructure, new developments in engineering and stuff like that, and more freedoms for people to have in society, right? But why would they just started sucking in everything? And that's the crazy thing about ideas, right? A lot of the times people were taking in good parts of the ideas, but also bad parts of the ideas. And that's the thing. Like, how can you look at sterilizing certain segments of people, certain segments of the population, because they have undesirable traits, right? As if we're not all people, as if we can control natural selection, right, of humans, right? Think about the scale that we would have to do that to control, the breeding of people, right? And it has been done before, right? There was a program, I believe, in the Prussian Empire. There was a king. There was a king in the Prussian Empire who specifically, bred very tall soldiers. Like these, all the soldiers in his unit were at least over, like, I believe 6'5", 6'7", something like that, right? That is possible to do. But think about if we tried to do that for entire nations, entire races of people. It'd be very hard to do. But yeah, Donnie Williams says Islamized Germans is wild. That's funny because if you go to Turkey, no, if you go to Germany right now, all you'll see are Islamized Germans. It's true. Like, go to Germany, it's nothing but Turkish people everywhere. You know what they call the westernmost province of Turkey? They call it Bavaria. They call it Berlin. Um, so continuing here. Continuing here, Turkish eugenic publications focus on both environmental and eugenic measures for racial purification. For Ermak and other eugenicists, environmental measures refer to the treatment of diseases such as syphilis and substance abuse, such as alcohol, as well as the promotion of health through, national sports programs. Through national sports programs. See, there's typos in this book. What's up with this book? How can this book have so many typos? I'm so mad. Anyway, compared to methods of reproductive control, environmental measures appeared to be less effective, yet they were deemed important because of their potential for strengthening and improving the Turkish race without requiring commitment to full-fledged and costly eugenic policies. And scholars dedicated a large number of publications to education, sports, and disease control. In contrast, measures for eugenic selection showed a closer intellectual affinity to Western eugenics, which forced Turkish eugenicists to adapt the Western idea of hereditarily cleansing hereditary cleansing as a national project. Wow. That was willing to sacrifice degenerate individuals for the sake of the nation and the present for the sake of the future. For Ermak, however, only selection could prevent the ominous outcome awaiting European culture, in which he presumably included Turkey: hereditary degeneration. Following the eugenic dogma of the period, Ermak distinguished between active selection, encouraging genetically superior individuals to reproduce, and passive selection, measures to prevent the reproduction of inferior individuals. Ermak's list of degenerate individuals included psychopaths, alcoholics, murderers, epileptics, the deaf, and the mute. Other lists were more extensive. In a book published by the official National Hygiene Institutes, the list included even those distinguished by undesirable moral characteristics, adding wicked and immoral people to the category, along with the insane, epileptics, the mute, the deaf, the blind, murderers, and alcoholics. Although Ermak preferred sterilization as the most humane method for the protection of advanced nations, others considered the confinement of degenerate elements more desirable. At a time when crime control was largely a local community affair, the Turkish eugenicist harsh law and order approach signified the penetration of the state and its drive for modernization into a tradition bound society. Furthermore, the authority to define criminality and suggest solutions gave immense political power to biometrics by associating it with scientific infallibility. Sadi Ermak followed Italian criminologist Cesare Lombroso in the latter's presumption that physiological appearance both reflected and determined mental characteristics and lay at the root of criminal behavior. However, he did not share Lombroso's stance against capital punishment. Ermak recommended the execution of all convicted murderers, regardless of extenuating circumstances, because the individual who committed such crimes predominantly belonged to the strata that lacked culture. Hence, it was necessary to show blood to these kinds of people. In 1935, Ermak translated Lombroso's major work on crime, Le Crime, Causes et Remedies, into Turkish, and began ardently defending Lombroso's criminal anthropology as a model for crime prevention in Turkey. Although by then, Western criminologists had already switched their interest from physio, physiognomic, sorry, physiognomic signs to mental characteristics. In Ermac's analysis, criminal types were not only individual but also racial. He specifically singled out Jews and Gypsies as examples of racial groups with a criminal propensity. His argument that Gypsies were a living example of a murderous race aligned well with the dominant Nazi eugenics of the period. You know, there's a funny meme. There's a meme. It's like Europeans, when they talk about race in America, and there's like a picture of Martin Luther King. And then Europeans, when they talk about gypsies in Europe, and there's like a picture of Hitler. It's so crazy. It's so crazy. If Turkish people are white, yes, they're white because they hate gypsies just as much as any European does, right? You would think like the way Europeans talk about gypsies, you would think like somebody talked bad about their mother. Oh, haha. Oh, that was not funny. That was not funny. All right. Biometrically inclined scholars tried to envision an authoritarian regime that was the best suited for the application of eugenic policies. And for many of them, Nazi Germany was the epitome of an orderly society under a powerful leader. Another figure of admiration Republican scholars used to justify authoritarianism was Nietzsche. In Saadi Ermak's treatment of Nietzsche, we can also find evidence of his support for a Nazi-style system of government, a superhuman leader followed by an unquestioning mass of individuals, Ermak argues. We can consider Nietzsche the greatest democratic philosopher if real democracy means, instead of hegemony of the masses, the governing of nations by their truly select individuals, with a single individual standing at the top of the government and assuming the nation's will to power to the greatest extent. Thus, any system would be considered democratic, using Ermak's reasoning, if by democracy we mean the exact opposite of democracy. A similar conceptual confusion exists in his discussion of humanism. Ermak's frequent rhetorical appeals to humanism in this worldview indicated a social system in which individuals knew their place in a carefully devised social hierarchy. Leaders ruled, masses followed, and everybody would be content to act according to their hereditary potential. Although Ermak remained vague about the identity of this leader, decades later he would not hesitate to claim that Nietzsche's Übermensch was none other than Ataturk. Ataturk is the Übermensch. We found him. We have found him. All right. The founder of the Turkish Republic. Even without naming names, however, Nietzsche's work was clearly intended as a justification of authoritarian rule over the masses. Spreading biometric knowledge. Biometric knowledge neither went completely unchallenged, for example, see Veldet 1939, nor did it result in extreme policy measures such as forced sterilizations. However, having been assigned a significant role in indigenizing Western modernity through racial pseudoscience, it was not kept within a small circle of academics. In a public lecture, The Importance of Genetic Knowledge from Biological, Economic, and National Points of View, a scholar connected genetics with national pride. The importance of genetics is great, especially from a national perspective. A citizen who has learned how the weaknesses of body and character are transmitted and how they could be disastrous for the homeland would find a way to do his duty in the most correct manner. Finally, it is again thanks to the knowledge of genetics that a nation whose grandfathers created a great civilization can be sure of preserving those same talents, despite having stagnated for years without any development, and its chest puffs out in pride with the confidence that it can find an even greater strength to destroy whatever obstacles to progress may lie ahead. Eugenicist attempts to popularize biometric knowledge by appealing to nationalism and modernity succeeded when there was government support for their dissemination efforts. Public conferences were a crucial means of this dissemination, and universities, especially after the 1933 university reform, were the primary institution responsible for them. The other important institution was the CHP, the party that ruled the country until 1946 without opposition. The analysis of the messages disseminated at a number of party conferences presented below shows the significance of biometrics in public discourses. The virtual uniformity of the messages at these conferences suggests that the CHP has some control over the content. If I remember right, the CHP is like the version of the Democrats in Turkey. Like they're the left-wing mainstream party, right, in Turkey. Uh, and so, yeah, it's interesting because they're the party that sort of brought all the reforms to Turkey that modern Turks generally like, right? Like women have freedom to work, live where they want, not be married to a man who has multiple wives, stuff like that. But since the CHP is sort of like fallen out of favor, and I believe there was like a few military coups, like one in the 80s, and then since then it's been AKP, the right wing party that belongs to Erdogan, running the show. That's my understanding. I wonder if this might be a different CHP other than the CHP now of Turkey, but somebody clarify that for me in the comments. Acti says, it's weird in Turkey that left wing is sort of racist. LOL, it makes sense. This is the thing. Even our Democrats were racist, right? The Republicans and Democrats are racist in America. They're both branches of the same white supremacist tree. They're both wings on the same racist ass bird. So Acti says, no, it's the same party. Okay. Yeah. Ozzy said, acting more racist than the right. Yeah, I talked about this in a video while in Turkey. Yeah, there was a sign from the left wing person who was going up against Erdogan during their last presidential election. He put up a sign that says, kick the Syrians out. Like, imagine if Joe Biden had a sign that says, kick the Mexicans out. Like, just a sign that says that. And Joe Biden's just like standing by the picture like this. Now, I'm pretty sure a lot of people might like that. I'm sure a lot of people would love if Joe Biden had a sign that said, kick the migrants out. My name's Joe Biden and I approve this message. That would be great for a lot of people. But yeah, I don't know. Acti, you can answer Ozzy's questions about that. But very interesting. CHP, same party, same party. So even in the absence of explicit censoring, it is likely that individual speakers were carefully screened. The intellectual level of conferences was neither so high as to appeal only to scholars, nor so low as to address the largely uneducated masses. Instead, the goal appears to have been to widen what was a small elite circle by creating an intermediate, less elite group. These loyal mediators, school teachers, civil servants, and military officers, would in turn be responsible for relaying the information to less educated groups. The party conferences usually took place in the Helkeveri, or People's House, another institution designed by the party to promote and reinforce Republican values. The People's Houses performed important ideological functions from their establishment in 1932 until the beginning of multi-party politics in 1950. Beyond the apparent goal of enlightening the uneducated population by offering activities related to various disciplines, such as history, language, art, literature, and sports, the People's Houses were intended to garner widespread ideological support for the Republican regime. Not all the lectures given in these institutions there were published. Some appeared only in the activity reports of particular People's Houses in various cities. Fortunately, an entire series of lectures from 1938 to 1941 was published by the party itself. The majority of speakers were academics from the newly established universities in Istanbul and Ankara. The first group of conferences took place in 1938, and the presentations were published as 44 separate booklets in two series. The second group, held between 1939 and 1941, appeared as 24 edited collections consisting of the transcripts of 5 conferences and included 119 papers. Although the data are taken from a relatively brief period, 4 years between 1938 and 1941, and a limited number of documents, 163 lectures published in the 2 series, there is still sufficient evidence to suggest that during this period, when Nazi propaganda in Turkey was at its peak and the Nazi regime itself seemed invincible, a similar concern with racial purity and hereditary improvement had penetrated Turkey's elite circles, and that the dissemination of this scientific knowledge to larger audiences was seen as vital. So basically what he's saying here is, like, back in the day, you know, the leaders of Turkey were like the left-wing people, CHP, trying to bring modernity to Turkey. And when they had a big conference for the people to explain their ideas, a lot of their ideas permeated with, the ideas of eugenics, protecting the race, improving the race through selective breeding, and making sure that the imbeciles are, neutered, stuff like that. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Okay. So, analyzing the ideological content of the lectures is no straightforward task. A cursory scan of the text indicates that while some of them are clearly ideological in purpose, others deal primarily with technical issues, such as dental hygiene, precautions against earthquakes, or the laws of physics. Even these papers, however, cannot be treated as entirely ideologically irrelevant. Frequently, otherwise dreary lectures on the economic principles of monetary regulation, the legal principles of copyright, or matter and energy in physics erupt with curiously vehement references to the greatness of the Turks and the Republican regime. Many papers therefore occupy an ambiguous position, blurring the line between the technical and the non-technical and making it difficult to clearly code the text of these party conferences. Nonetheless, it is possible to categorize the speeches into four groups based on a careful consideration of textual and contextual clues in terms of the overall message that each particular lecture was attempting to convey. The first group consists of articles with a clearly biometric agenda. The main goal of these articles was to convince readers that specific measures were necessary to safeguard the Turks' hereditary qualities. Some use explicitly eugenic language, while others are more subtle, focusing on improving the hereditary qualities of future generations by means of general health measures and physical education. The second category includes articles that are anthropometrically oriented. So, broadly dealing with the Turks' essential, unchanging qualities originating in a pre-lapsarian past. Pre-lapsarian past. I gotta look up that word. That word is crazy. Pre-lapsarian. Anybody know what that means? Pre-lapsarian. Characteristic of the time before the fall of man, innocent and unspoiled. Okay, so basically referring, like this is a word that says like referring to a time before Adam and Eve, right before they ate the forbidden fruit, the fall of man. Um, Interesting. Never heard that word before. Unchanging qualities originating in a pre-lapsarian past. Uh, so basically saying like, they were talking about the racial science that the Turks were always this people, chromatism. There was a Turkish race even back in the ancient times, and they were unified and coded in that racial structure, right? That's what the eugenicists believe. So they're trying to say we need to preserve this heritage and have selective breeding, stuff like that. So yeah, that's what they're getting at here. Continuing here. The third group consists of articles that glorify the present. These, which I have labeled tributes to the Republic, praise the Republican order, often comparing it to the Ottoman past or to other countries. Finally, the fourth group includes technical articles meant to enlighten citizens by transmitting scientific knowledge. Technical articles are relevant for another reason. They were an effective way to connect the Republican regime science itself, bolstered the credibility of Republican ideology, and contributed to the stability of the overall message, and also helped to eliminate possible opposition. In turn, while technical writing made the Republican message more convincing, ideological claims made science more appealing. Science constituted the backbone of the regime's credibility. Yet, without direction, the message might be lost in a mass of technical vocabulary. The universalist claims of Western science had to be negotiated with the local necessities of modernization. Hence, the Turkishness of science was as important as the scientific establishment of Turkishness. All right, want to jump ahead? Okay, there's a lot here. I want to see how many pages we have in chapter 4. I want to see if I can run through chapter 4. If this is another chapter 3. All right, chapter 4 might be one that we pick up on next time. I don't want to blow through this. Let's see. I'm going to take a water break while I see. Chapter 4 just seemed to go on and on. But anything is possible, right? Anything is possible. I mean, it's just a book, right? Yeah, chapter 4 is quite a doozy. I should look up the table of contents. I just don't want to scroll back. I don't want to lose my place. Yeah, chapter 4 go on for quite a few. All right, chapter 4 goes in depth. Chapter 4 goes there. A lot to see here. Oh, close encounters and racial discourses. Okay, so I already jumped to chapter 5. Okay, so chapter 5 is somewhere here. You know what? Let me just go to the table of contents. Let me go to the table of contents. Let me check that. All right. Chapter 4, race and early Republican period. It goes all the way to 163. 163. Page 163. Yeah, but I was in the biometric scholarship in the service of Turkish modernization. Yeah, page 117. No, wait. Yeah, 124. 124. Let's go. All right, spreading biometric knowledge. We read through that. All right, we read through this. Yeah, then we stopped right here. All right, analysis of presentations at CHP party conference. So yeah, 60. So anthropometrics. Okay, my thing just froze here. Okay, my page just froze. Oh, come on now. Come on now. All right, 128. Yeah. Let's see. Can we run through this section? Mm, there's quite a bit. I'm gonna just. All right. I'm gonna read through this page right here. Yeah. All right. Let's go to 130. Let's see if we can make it to 130. Anyway, so yeah, the second largest group of articles, apart from the category other, came from the field of law. More than half of these presentations primarily glorified the Republican regime. Accordingly, law seems to have been assigned a present-oriented task. Finally, the third largest group of lectures came from the scholarly discipline of history, as 8 out of 19 historical papers presented anthropometric arguments. One should add that the set of 8 historical lectures, categorized as tributes to the Republic, attests to the doubly useful nature of history in building a foundation for prehistoric Turkishness. Republican historiography was continuously appealing to the past in order to portray a favorable view of the current regime. Biometric themes also frequently appeared in the proclamation of various public officials, whether delivered at public celebrations, on the radio as lectures, or in newspaper articles. While the technical aspects of eugenics may have been debated only among scholars, biometric themes that were fit for national consumption circulated more widely. Biometric references in the official discourse were made in several different ways, by pointing to links between biological and social phenomenon and proposing solutions to social problems, by insisting on the unchanging character of the Turks, and most significantly by appealing to the need to protect the timeless essence of Turkishness from degeneration. These public messages from Republican leaders filled in the gap between the technical details of eugenics and the more comprehensive and discursively useful discourse of biometrics. While scholars were molding eugenics into a format useful to Turkish nationalism, the ruling elite was absorbing and propagating a watered down version of this body of knowledge in order to convince citizens of the utility of sports, hygiene, population increase, the regulation of marriage and reproduction, and the control of mentally inferior individuals and criminals. Scholars of biometrics, as we saw above, place great emphasis on linking individual and communal health. The dissemination efforts pursued a similar goal. An important goal of the public messages was to help individuals envision themselves as part of a larger racial and national reality. Individuals do not only live for themselves, according to a member of the parliament, but also for the existence of an entire race and of a centuries old nation. Therefore, the goal in sports is the national race before everything else. Every Turkish youth should work knowing that while doing sports, he strengthens his homeland and race spiritually and bodily. In a speech given in 1937 on the National Day of Youth and Sports, the Interior Minister addressed Turkish youth as follows: Turkish youth, you are the children of a strong and powerful nation. There is no bad legacy from your mothers and fathers in your nerves and veins. The same rhetoric of blood and inheritance was adopted by the founder of the Republic, as when a Turkish woman won the Miss World beauty pageant in 1932. Ataturk responded by pointing to the natural beauty of Turkish women and to scientific ways of protecting it. We are happy that the judge of the world decided on this Turkish child, who has shown that the noble beauty of the Turkish race is well protected. However, Keriman, as we all heard, said that she did not claim to be the most beautiful of all Turkish women. This beautiful Turkish girl should, of course, consider herself content and happy for introducing to the world, with the confirmation of the judges of the world, the beauty that is naturally manifested in her own race. Let me add that I found it very natural that one of the Turkish girls was selected as Miss World, because I know that historically the Turkish race is the most beautiful race in the world. However, on this occasion, I find it necessary to remind Turkish youth of the following: learn how to protect in a scientific manner your natural beauty, of which we are proud, and do not ignore the need for continuous work in the matter. Nevertheless, what you really need to strive for, as did your mothers and ancestors, is achieving first place in the world for high culture and lofty virtue. I'm going to ask a question. I'm asking this question. This is a very vague, vague ass answer. Learn how to protect in a scientific manner your natural beauty, of which we are proud. Acti, Acti, jump into the chat. Acti, I gotta ask you this question. This is your guy Ataturk talking. Do you think Ataturk would approve of us having kids? Based on what he is saying here. Learn how to protect. Learn how to protect the natural beauty of Turkish people in a scientific manner. Acti, answer the question based on what your guy Ataturk is saying here. I don't think he would be too fond of watching the video, My Big Fat Turkish Wedding, on Simon Hill Keeps It Trill. I don't think he would be too fond of me smacking that big booty up and down. Based on what he's saying, Ataturk has said, we are happy the judges see the natural beauty of the Turkish race and that the Turkish race has protected their beauty. Okay. Acti says, based on this, no. I'm not tripping. And I'm not trying to insult your guy because it's natural for an old white man in the 20th century to think of racist stuff. It's natural. Okay, I am not the guy who's like, I'm so mad Thomas Jefferson was an anti-black racist. No, I'm not mad at that because it was natural at the time. That was science at the time. Science was, let's measure somebody's nose and skull and the measurement from the back of their neck to the tip of their chin and decide how likely they are to steal a candy bar. Like, that was science. So very interesting acting. Your guy Ataturk said this. That's what I'm saying. I don't know. Learn how to protect in a scientific manner. Okay. Exception to white supremacists and eugenics. Okay. Ataturk sounds confused, says Ozzy. He's writing in a very vague way. It's very vague, in my opinion. Anyway, Ataturk, after establishing the biometric importance of the event, downplayed the significance of the pageant in his last sentence by gesturing beyond the superficiality of physical beauty toward a deeper level of Turkish culture and wisdom. This gesture, however, was possible only through connecting the biometric project with Republican anthropometrics by claiming the ancientness of Turkish culture and wisdom. At a deeper level, Ataturk's sudden modulation of his racial message on the beauty of Turks into a pedagogic statement about the necessity of hard work, what we observe in the sudden shift in a moment of racial eruption, checked by an immediate restraint that evoked the taken for granted nature of the racially superior qualities of the Turks. The following passage from a speech given by İsmet İnönü, Ataturk's successor to the presidency, to a group of university students in 1939 illuminates this issue further. But the main issue is the assurance that our university students give for the future. Our male and female university students are in a position to be the most convincing evidence for Turkey's strong future in terms of their diligence, ideals, virtues, and character. Have you noticed when I was talking about the merits of our students, I did not mention their intelligence and talents. That is, those characteristics that are more innate, because it is known that our students always have these merits in abundance. The basis and quality that are really necessary for today's civilization and that we especially neglected in the past few centuries are the talent to work regularly and methodically without experiencing weariness. Okay, in this passage, President Inonu makes explicit references and innate racial characteristics and national potential. Even when there was no explicit reference to racial characteristics, the audience was expected to make the necessary connections between the potential and the actual, between innate characteristics and cultivatable skills, between genetic inheritance and the development of that inheritance through hard work, and thus between race and modernity. The biometric project and its operation in Turkish modernization left a powerful perception. Each human group carried an innate ability to modernize in inherently different degrees. The Turks were gifted with this ability to a high degree. They simply needed to work hard to reach their innate potential. If something is innate, why do you need to work hard to do it? If you're a naturally talented singer, do you have to work hard to, be a great singer? You get what I'm saying? That's just the question. It seems sort of paradoxical. Hey, we are naturally, closer to modernity because, we're Turks and, we're white. So we have to work really hard to be as good as the white people in Western Europe. Hey, I'm a bit confused. It's a bit paradoxical. Even when the former part of this equation was left unsaid, it still worked as a premise of the latter statement. Thus, the Turkish response to the paradox of third world nationalisms took a racial form. As long as Turkishness contained the essential element that made the West modern, Turkey could create a distinctive tradition within modernity. Being the West other, or the terrible Turk, posed no problem as long as the Republican elite could convince themselves and everyone else that Turks were innately Western. Comparisons of policy measures with those of Western countries constituted an essential tool for connecting biometrics to modernity. An article published in 1939 mentions the 1930 law on general hygiene as the government's attempt to build a strong and healthy nation while avoiding the mistakes made by other modern nations. Sadi Ermak's comparison of the law on physical education with the German mobilization of sport also used the putative link between the necessities of being a modern nation and the importance of biometric policies. The Interior Minister Shukuru Kaya, in a strangely circular way, had introduced the law in Parliament using a similar vocabulary, pointing to the need to improve the natural qualities of the nation with the help of modern methods and techniques. The Turkish nation is essentially strong. The Turkish nation does not derive its strength only from its race. Neither does it owe its strength only to racial characteristics. The Turks are a nation that has engaged in all the sports and strengthened its body with their help. In order to have accomplished such glorious victories in the past, those who accomplished them, the Turks, must have been very strong. Other scholars also frequently voice his approval um, of the alignment of government policies with biometric principles. I really wish he used the word eugenics instead of biometric. That's so confusing for like the general reader. I like have to remember in my mind we're talking about like eugenics here, like Anyway, Mazhar Osman Uzman praised the measures to provide financial assistance to families with more than 6 children, arguing that families that have more than 4 children can be considered true patriots. As far as negative eugenics was concerned, Uzman seemed pleased with the law on general hygiene and with the limitations the Turkish civil code imposed on the marriages of those considered unfit. These legal restrictions, in Uzman's view, encouraged the development of improved hereditary hygiene and that they would stop the spread of degenerative hereditary diseases such as madness, syphilis, gonorrhea, and leprosy. Usman insisted that the government's essentially eugenic concerns in these regulatory measures were necessary and justifiable. Textbooks also offer biometric interpretations of public health directives as well as other measures against contagious diseases. Evidence of biometric language appears in a 4 volume secondary school history textbook that was heralded as a great accomplishment of the regime and that set the standard for all subsequent textbooks. The last volume, which dealt with contemporary issues, offered a comparison with the Ottoman period in which the Turkish race, famous for its strength, was wasting away. The Republican government, according to the textbook, took unprecedented measures, including the implementation of the law on general hygiene against diseases that threatened general health and racial hygiene. The textbook considered these measures to be among the greatest achievements of the Republican regime. Interesting, interesting. So, I think we're going to wrap it up here. I've been reading for like a good 2.5 hours. I'm a bit tired. I got English class in about an hour, so I'm going to rest up a bit. But this was a very interesting read. It was a very interesting live stream. I want to give a shout out to everybody who came in here: Acti, Ozzy, Donnie Williams, Avery Adams. There was a Turkish guy who was in here earlier. He didn't answer the question I asked him. Ata Uche jumped in here. But yeah, shout out to everybody who tuned in for this live stream. This is an interesting read. We're going to continue on in chapter 4 in our next live stream. We're probably going to finish chapter 4. Each of these chapters is very long. Going back to the table of contents here. Going back to the table of contents, what we read today was essentially uh, we read the section on racial vocabulary. It's like how they defined race back then. Mermaids, fish, humans, the taxonomic discourse, like how much modernity did Turkey want to bring in to its nation. Uh, Biometric mobilization to protect and improve the race. Basically, this is a fancy way of saying like eugenics, right? They were focused on, trying to use eugenics to improve the race and stop people from spreading bad genes. So Ozzy says this was the most interesting part so far. Absolutely, it was. I think now the book is picking up steam and actually covering the issues related to the conception of race and whiteness and modernity in the minds of the creators of early Republican Turkey. So yeah, it's been an interesting live stream. Thank you, Ozzy, for tuning in. Thank you, everybody else, for tuning in as well. In our next live stream, we're going to finish up Chapter 4, Anthropomorphic Mobilization to Discover the Turkish Race. We'll also try maybe to read the first part of Chapter 5, Intellectual Exchange and Historical Contingency in that's the first section of Chapter 5, Close Encounters and Racial Discourses. And this book ends on page 238. So I'm pretty sure we'll probably get through this book if I read it every day for at least 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Pretty sure we'll reach the end by the middle to the end of next week, and I should have some time because I'm doing some English teaching out here in Budapest all day. But I'll probably come home after class and do some reading on live with the people. But y'all stay tuned for movie reviews, Simon and Acty movie reviews, Simon and Acty going live. Me and Acty might go live right after this live stream is done and talk about the Kendrick Lamar video, Joe Biden dropping out of the race, and other things happening in pop culture. And yeah, anyway, that's all I got to say. Y'all be easy out there, and peace. Peace.